All right.
All right.
Hello, hello.
G'day, Kayla.
Oh,
Welcome.
First time catching us live. Welcome.
Ah, Maddie. Hello, hello. My fellow ranting partner.
Kayla's just studying, so
She can actually
can
chill.
actually hang out. It's awesome.
Just
So since we do have some new people, we are going to be reading a fanfic of Harry Potter.
Continuing to read this fanfic from Harry Potter.
We're this close to being done.
We're getting there. We are almost there. I am looking for the chapter right now that we will need to be reading.
Sarah, Mike, hello.
Oh, yes. Hello, hello.
Unipeg, hello, Glenn. And we are doing great, Kayla. Thank you. Now that I'm finally out of work.
Yeah, right? Ugh, for real.
It's a long day. Glad you can make it too, Sarah. Maybe it was just one of those days. I swear, when someone has a long day at work, it seems like everyone else agrees.
It was
like
kind of a
something in the
long
air.
day today. Oh.
No, you're over here like, ooh, well, I had a good day. I don't know, you really didn't come in, like, venting today after work, so...
Yeah, it wasn't that bad. It was just kind
I'm
of long.
assuming it was a good day.
It was just kind of long.
Tale of Two Cities? I'm down to read it. How about you?
I am so down to read A Tale of Two Cities. Love that book.
Pride and Prejudice has opened my mind, because I honestly did not expect it to be as good as it was.
Yeah.
Well, it is. We're still reading
Right,
it. But...
right. It's... Oh, Bailey, stop!
Only 6 chapters in, but I'm already kind of invested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, see? He's liking it. I'm sorry you couldn't start grad school. That's a bummer.
No.
You're gonna stress out the new man. You stop it.
He's calmed down. Okay, what'd I miss? Week off from our read almost did him in.
I'm sorry.
So sorry. We'll do our best not to let it happen again.
Hello, Anna. Sorry. Oh, so you could start grad school this fall. My bad. I thought I read that she couldn't start, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry. No, she's going to start grad school. Eventually, I would like to go to grad school, but I am taking a little time off from that.
Oh, just finished recording. I know how that is, Dan. Sometimes recordings just seem like they take forever.
Hang on. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Lex and Biggs, I'm doing some cleanup in my room, so I might be in and out, and I might be behind the thread. No worries, Melanie. Just happy that you're here.
Bailey's in timeout.
Bad boy.
Well, you don't have to. I already told him.
Oh, you
You
did?
gotta rub it in.
Well,
Yeah, he was just barking at some dogs walking by.
oh.
Oh no, Dan, I'm sorry for the seizures.
Yeah, that sucks, dude. That's a bummer. Oh my gosh.
Let us know when it's uploaded. Definitely check it out. Are you still uploading on your other channel? I saw that you changed the name of it.
Kayla, yeah, Bailey's just barking at other dogs.
Yeah.
That's all he's doing. He has a couple of bumps right there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he just went for a walk. Something probably irritated him.
Yep, always does. Oh, the Shake, Rattle, and Roll channel.
Oh, okay.
Last time, Remus and Grant, like, almost kissed. Because they got drunk together.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
But Sirius walked in on them.
Yeah.
And somehow Sirius didn't
Freak out. Yeah. Yeah.
You're just here, alone, drunk, with your ex.
Yep, pretty much.
That's okay. This is fine. Everything is fine. No red flags.
Well, Lupin stopped him from freaking out by using sex again, right? Didn't he sleep with him?
Yeah.
Or no, or did Sirius... Did he sleep with him, or did Sirius just be like, nah, no?
No, he did sleep with him. And just like that, Dan is back.
Woo, woo. Should we just start then?
Yeah, why not? I love how Dan has multiple channels because he like switches every now and then.
Yeah, he does.
Just changing his identity like a superhero.
Right.
I am Superman. Or am I just Clark Kent?
Depends on my mood today. All right. Are you ready, Bailey? I don't know if I'm ready. All right. Let's do this.
All right.
Oh, Angela is having a good time with Pride and Prejudice. There's a lot of humor there. There is a lot of humor
Right?
there.
I did not expect it.
To be so funny.
Yeah. I am 100% overjoyed with how good it turned out to be.
Yeah.
Like, I knew it's considered a classic. Okay. But there's a lot of stories that are considered classics, and I understand why. It's, like, written really well, but it's just not interesting at all. This happens to be interesting and well written.
Yeah. Yeah. Jane Austen is really funny. Mr. Bennet is hilarious. Mrs. Bennet is very funny. Mr. Darcy is very sarcastic.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Bennet, too.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're liking it as much as you were, because I wasn't sure if you were gonna like it. I was like, I was thinking it's a really good book. I hope he really does like it, because it has this reputation of just being like, it's just a romance novel, or it's just this, or it's just a period piece. It's not, but it's a lot more than just that. There's a lot of really just fun stuff in there, and I was hoping that you were gonna start pick up on some of that. And Anna says she likes listening to your theories, what you think is gonna happen.
Nice. Honestly, I'm glad we're reading a story that I haven't read, because that's one of my favorite parts, is just come up with theories.
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying them. So it's definitely
Maybe next
fun.
time I'll have to read you a story that I've read, but you haven't.
Yeah.
I would say The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll, but...
I know what happens.
That's true. But
but I don't know the original story, so...
But I also think that's an English book, and I can't do an English accent.
Dan, we haven't checked our comments, so we've been really kind of bad about that. We're going to go through the comments here sometime this week and probably post a comment video where we go through some of your comments. Oh, you replied to some today, I guess.
Yeah, I went through.
So what did he say about Pride and Prejudice?
When you called me on lunch.
Oh. How does Dan feel about Pride and Prejudice?
What did Dan say? Dan said He sees it turning into like a 19th century soap opera.
Oh. I don't think it is.
Or no, Jerry Springer.
Oh. I don't think it is. It's
I'm okay with that. Jerry Springer is awful TV, but somehow I can't look away.
It's entertaining.
Whenever it's on.
That being said, let's just do it. Chapter 168. The War. Spring and Summer, 1980. Sad endings and happy beginnings. Content warning. Death of parents.
Oh, wait.
You know I'm born to lose, and gambling's for fools, but that's the way I like it, baby. I don't want to live forever. These songs, like, they're all very melodramatic, aren't they?
Why does there have to be one in the beginning of each chapter?
Because it's called All the Young Dudes. It's based off of a song. I don't know.
Okay, but then it should just be all Beatles songs.
Yeah, but All the Young Dudes isn't a Beatles song.
What?
No.
Oh. Who sings All the Young Dudes?
It's Mott the Hoople.
Oh, never heard them.
Yeah. Anyway. That January, just over a year after his mother's funeral, Remus attended another memorial service, this time for Fleamont and Euphemia Potter. They passed away within hours of each other in the final bleak days of December. Their loss was felt immensely, and not only by the members of the Order. The Potter mansion was full for weeks with visitors, mourners, and old friends, and every one of them had a story of some kindness James's parents had performed. Euphemia always said I could ask her anything when I saw her at St. Mungo's, Marlene sobbed. She was such a brilliant healer. I wish I'd known her longer. They were so kind to us after we eloped, Andromeda said, holding Ted's hand and bouncing her daughter on her hip. Checked on us all the time, made sure we never struggled for anything. I just can't believe they're gone. If our home is even half as welcoming as theirs, I'll be proud, Arthur Weasley added, cleaning his glasses, which had grown misty. The very best of wizard kind, Dumbledore intoned in the speech he gave at the service. A beacon of understanding, tolerance, good humour and community. All those values we hold most dear. Sort of fitting to have them go at Christmas, one wizened old crone said at the wake. Always loved coming to the Potters' Boxing Day party. I'll miss Effie's mince pies, an old man added. I'll miss Monty's home brew, another cackled. A smatter of fond laughter, followed by tender silence as everyone recalled the Potters' limitless hospitality. Remus kept his own memories of the Potters to himself, because he felt he had the least claim on them. Still, he would never forget that it was they who had taken him in when he'd found himself homeless at 17, and they who'd helped him locate his mother. In a way, it was different from the earlier deaths in the Order, because the Potters had died at an advanced age, and they hadn't been murdered, so there was more room for happy memories. It still didn't feel very fair. Time is meaningless when it comes to people you love, Remus reflected. 11 months had not been enough time with Hope, and 20 years had probably not been enough for James. Sirius, Peter, and Remus silently made the decision to pull together for James. He'd been the source of the Marauders' strength ever since they were children, had selflessly defended or supported each of them at one time or another, and there was no question that they returned the favour now, in his darkest hour. They took up the task of greeting as many of the droppers-by as possible and keeping them away from James, who had quite enough to deal with. For a solid 2 weeks, the three of them spent their days accepting bunches of flowers and pots of home cooking, which was useful because Gully the house elf had become inconsolable and spent his time curled up under the aga, sobbing and drinking butterbeer. They have an aga!
Oh, wow.
They got money.
They're the Potters.
We knew they had money, but they have an aga.
They got aga money.
They got aga money. Under the aga, sobbing and drinking butterbeer, Lily handled everything financial or legal. Remus couldn't help but admire how quickly she took to wizard property law, while Alice and Molly helped her manage the house and pack up the things which needed to be packed up. It was grimly fitting that 1980 began with death. Years later, it would mark a turning point in the war for Remus, as if losing the Potters had shaken the very foundations of reality. After their funeral, less and less things began to make sense. Things he had once felt sure of became uncertain, and the already small circle of people he trusted and loved began to shrink further. For the rest of January, Sirius and Remus passed each other like ships in the night. One would be up late, the other awake with the dawn for some mission or the other. They were both determined to make up the slack for James, and it kept them busier than ever. One or both of them might sleep at the Potters one night, or else stay with someone else in the order for safety's sake. Mourning Fleamont and Euphemia on top of all of that meant that the short hours they did spend together were filled with silence. Sirius had cried the day he found out. They both had, but the pain was more raw for Sirius. "It's not fair! It's not fair!" he repeated over and over, eyes wild and desperate. Remus carefully put his own grief aside in order to be the stronger one, and found that things were easier when he focused his attention on helping Sirius. It was very hard work, and for a while it seemed there would be nothing at all to feel happy about again. Their only piece of good news came completely out of the blue, as good news generally does, one Sunday in early February. Sirius was out with James, not on a mission for once. As boys, James and Sirius had crawled into each other's beds whenever one of them was unhappy. As men, they spent long afternoons rocketing round the countryside on Sirius's motorbike. Remus was not jealous. If anything, it was a relief that he didn't have to go. He was spending the afternoon studying counter curses, which at least made him feel like he was doing something useful. He'd just decided to have a quick break and make himself a pot of tea when an owl pecked on the kitchen window. It bore a note from Lily. "Can you pop over before 5? I'll cook dinner." And of course he got ready to leave at once. It was a good thing, too. His own supper plans were beans on toast, which he'd already had 3 times this week. It was very cold still. The frost hung round for weeks that February, and spring took a lifetime to arrive. Remus was grateful to be able to simply step through the fireplace in their flat and instantly appear in the Potters' living room without having to go outside. He hoped Sirius was wrapped up properly. Wind chill was no joke at the speeds he drove. "I'm here," Remus called, brushing soot and flue powder off his shabby robes. Hieronymus the cat mewed angrily at him. He'd disturbed the warm spot on the rug. "Kitchen!" Lily called back. Remus wandered through. The house felt empty, and had for weeks now, but the kitchen was as warm and comforting as it ever had been. Lily was sitting at the broad oak table, poring over a recipe book, her wand holding her hair up in a messy bun. There was a self-stirring pot on the stovetop, and something delicious smelling in the oven. "Hello, gorgeous," she grinned, looking up at him. "Hiya," he waved. "Can I help with anything?" "Knives and forks would be great." She nodded at the dresser against the wall. "We'll eat in here. I think it's cozier." "Just the 2 of us?" he asked, going to pull out the cutlery. 5. She shook her head. "Peter's due in a minute, and the boy shouldn't be too much longer. Well, depending on Sirius." "Huh?" Remus frowned. The note hadn't mentioned Sirius. Lily was blushing. So I asked you here because I have something to tell you." Remus's hands began to shake, and he dropped the butter knife he'd been holding. No news was ever good these days, and he developed a bit of a paranoia around announcements. "It's good," Lily said quickly, seeing the look on his face. "I promise. It's just that, we thought it might be best, James thought it might be best, if he told Sirius on his own, you know, 1-to-1, after what happened last time." "Last time?" Remus frowned. They couldn't be getting married again, surely. "You're not splitting up?" "Remus, I said it's a good thing," Lily laughed lightly. "Honestly, you always think the worst." She stood up, clearing her books from the table. Remus took a good look at her. She was a bit thicker round the hips. Not that he'd ever say anything to one of his oldest and best friends. And anyway, it suited her. She was still uncommonly pretty, in his opinion. But she smelled slightly differently, too. He blinked and shook his head, slamming the cutlery drawer so hard it rattled and Lily jumped. "You're pregnant!" She blushed harder and nodded, face stretched into the broadest smile Remus had seen on anyone in months. Lost for words, he hurried round the table to hug her. "Amazing!" he choked, suddenly very emotional. "Brilliant! Oh my God, Lily!" "I know!" she squealed. "Due in July. You have no idea how hard it's been to stay quiet." Remus stepped back to give her room and wiped his eyes. "Not because of Sirius." "No, just that," she conceded. "We wanted a proper mourning period. Euphemia and Fleamont knew, of course. It was heartbreaking to tell them, but I have to admit I am slightly concerned about how Sirius will take it." "If he says anything other than congratulations, I'll box his ears," Remus said fiercely. Lily laughed. "You'll have to get in queue behind me and James." Remus laughed, still wiping his eyes, and went to lay the table. No sooner had he set down the last plate than a rumbling roar could be heard in the distance, getting closer. Lily looked up at him and bit her lip. He just smiled at her. "It'll be fine." Sirius had been parking his bike on the back patio. Remus often wondered what Euphemia might make of that, but of course she could never refuse her blue-eyed boy anything, and would have forgiven the muddy tire tracks in her lawn with motherly indulgence. The patio doors rattled open and Sirius strode in, hair still windswept from flying, nose and cheeks pink from the cold. He was smiling so wide that Remus's heart skipped a beat, and he felt that old schoolboy crush resurface in him. "Mrs. Prongs!" Sirius went straight for Lily, arms wide, and enveloped her, kissing the top of her head. "Bloody brilliant!" Remus sighed with relief and went to shake hands with James, who'd come in behind Sirius, hair and scarf flying, wind-burned face glowing like a beacon of joy. "A kid!" was all Remus could think to say. "You're having a fucking kid!" James laughed, gripping his hand. "Too bloody right, Mooney!" "Sit down!" Sirius pulled a chair out for Lily, ushering her into it. "Merlin, Mooney, what sort of gentleman are you, letting Lily do all the work in her condition?" "Oi!" Remus scowled. "I laid the table." "Honestly, I'm fine," Lily giggled. "But if you boys want to serve dinner, be my guest. Lamb's in the oven, James. It should be done by now." So the three of them bustled round the kitchen, making quite a bit more noise and mess than was probably necessary. Sirius began whistling kooks, which James cracked out a bottle of champagne to toast, with butterbeer for Lily, and Remus just grinned until his cheeks hurt, watching his friends be happy together. Then Peter arrived, and it began all over again, their happiness multiplying as they sat down to a perfect family dinner. It was just what everyone needed. "How did this happen?" Peter exclaimed, mopping up gravy with his last Yorkshire pudding. "Well, Wormtail," Sirius smirked, "when a witch and wizard love each other very much—" "Shut up!" Peter laughed, kicking him under the table. "You know what I meant." "It just happened," James shrugged. "We might have got a little bit careless round Halloween." "James!" Lily slapped his arm lightly with the back of her hand. "No need for detail. I'm sure Mooney doesn't want to hear all that." "Why me?" Remus furrowed his brow. "Oh, well, you know, I just think you prefer to be discreet about, Lily fumbled for words. Remus folded his arms, staring at them all with mock indignation. "You all think I'm a prude!" They all burst out laughing, and Sirius patted him on the shoulder affectionately. "Don't worry, Mooney. They just don't know you like I know you." "What's that supposed to mean?" Peter started, but Remus, seeing where the conversation was heading, quickly intervened. "Have you got any ideas for a name yet?" "No, not really," Lily said, still chuckling. "A family name would be nice, but—" "Whatever you do," Sirius said, "call the poor kid something normal. No constellations, for Godric's sake." I'll drink to that. Remus raised his glass and drained it. It was his third, but he didn't think anyone had noticed, and besides, they were celebrating. When will you know what it is? Peter asked. We're not calling it, Peter, James teased him. Bagsy Godfather, Sirius shouted. You can't Bagsy Godfather, Peter said, outraged. Just did. Sirius poked his tongue out.
Before we go on, it went off page, so I want to remember to say it. Melanie asked what an aga is. So an aga is like a very expensive oven, basically.
Yeah, like the price of a car oven.
Mm-hmm.
They're always on. They're like always on.
Yeah. They're a heater and an oven.
Yeah. So it's like it's like having a furnace and an oven in one unit.
We only know that because of Great British Bake Off.
Yes.
We had to look it up because someone on there had an aga.
Yeah. Someone on there was like, my aga at home. And then we found out that, oh my god, this girl is rich because they're like 50 grand.
Yeah. For an oven.
For an oven, yeah. And so, as per usual, it was James and Lily who managed to bring everyone out of that gloomy winter slog, just in time for spring. The Marauders and their friends faced the rest of their year with fresh eyes and renewed purpose, because fighting a war was one thing, but fighting for the Potter's future child made every challenge seem more worthwhile. What was more, they weren't the only ones celebrating good news. Arthur and Molly welcomed yet another red-haired son that March, and Alice announced that she and Frank were also expecting in the summer. Imagine that, Mary said, clearing away teacups and mugs of coffee left behind from an order meeting. Their kids are all going to grow up together and go to Hogwarts together. Sort of nice, isn't it? Remus nodded in agreement. He would have given anything to be raised by one of these people, to have a childhood surrounded by magic and love and laughter. He'd never given much thought to children before. His own childhood had been such a disaster he didn't think he was fit to be a parent. But watching James and Lily do it, that actually sounded pretty nice. Of course, Remus's enthusiasm for baby prongs paled in comparison to Sirius's overwhelming excitement. It's going to be so much fun, Moony, he babbled, coming in one May afternoon from another spur-of-the-moment shopping trip. Imagine them all on brooms, the Order of the Phoenix Quidditch team. How old do you need to be to ride a broom? Remus asked, eyeing his packages nervously. None of them looked broom-shaped, but you never knew Sirius. They're mostly books and clothes, Sirius reassured him, laughing lightly. And some toys, just little things. This kid is going to be so spoilt, Remus tutted. Good, Sirius poked his tongue out. Doesn't do anyone any good to be brought up joyless, does it, Moony? He raised an eyebrow and Remus ducked his head, ashamed, and he never chastised Sirius about it again. In June, after the full moon, Remus was invited for another meeting with Moody and Ferox. A year older and wiser, he requested not to meet them at the Aura's office this time. They agreed. They didn't have much choice. Remus had grown very flippant about his role as an unofficial werewolf liaison officer, and it probably showed. At least Moody didn't boss him around much anymore. They met in a small working man's pub just outside of Derby. Remus arrived first and got himself a pint, then sat down with the newspaper he picked up at the train station. He took out the page with the crossword on it and folded it up neatly in his breast pocket. Sirius liked doing crosswords. He chose a seat in the back on the pub because it was quiet, but also because the seat was a high-backed wooden pew, which was good for his back. He was hurting after the last full moon still, and tried to sit straight. Ferox got there a few minutes later. All right there, Arkiv? He nodded, sitting down on the three-legged stool opposite Remus. They had all received instructions to start using fake names when out on order business in case anyone listened in. Remus wasn't overly fond of Kevin, but he had to admit it was probably better than his own ridiculous name. When the Marauders first heard about the code names they wanted to use, John, Paul, John, George, and Ringo, but Moody told them it was too obvious. Hello, Norman, Remus nodded at Ferox. Mr. Thompson won't be long. Good. Get you a drink? Nah, on duty. Remus shrugged and took a slug of his own beer. Ferox watched him with a level expression. So, his old teacher asked, how's tricks? Oh, you know, Remus shrugged again. We're all just doing what we can. Hear you've been busy. Got a knack for security, eh? Yeah, I've been helping out with Alice, Steffi, sorry. Ferox laughed gruffly at Remus's blunder. Don't worry about it. It's all bollocks anyway. Still, security's a good talent to have, eh? Something you might fancy doing for the ministry, maybe, when all of this is over. Security alarms? Remus frowned. He hadn't really thought about it before. I don't know, it's not really... I mean, I want to help people, obviously, but I'm not sure if people don't want someone like me in their homes. Cheer up, lad, Ferox said kindly. It's not all doom and gloom. Remus drank again. He was nearly finished and wondered if he would have time for a second pint. Probably not. Not very professional. Though it was technically medicinal. His back really hurt. Moody Mr. Thompson arrived a few moments later. He was looking more haggard than ever. The war seemed to affect him physically. He'd accumulated more scars than anyone Remus knew, except himself, maybe. In return, he'd lost more body parts. If Moody wasn't more careful, Remus thought, he'd end up like old Professor Kettleburn. Kevin, Norman, Moody nodded at them both. He was wearing Muggle clothes, or at least his approximation of them. A gaudy Hawaiian shirt paired with ancient-looking mustard-yellow bell-bottoms. Remus had to concentrate to keep a straight face. I'll get straight to business, he said, taking the third stool round the table. He's been seen again. Our mutual acquaintance. That meant Greyback. Remus swallowed, nodding. Where? Outside of Dublin. We reckon he's been keeping a low profile, licking his wounds, but he's still in you-know-who's pay. Remus nodded again. He'd known Greyback wouldn't be vanquished so easily. He'd known they would meet again, eventually. The good news is, Ferox said, leaning in, he hasn't been recruiting. All sources seem to say that most of his pack have left him. Sources? Remus looked at him sharply. Well, Ferox grinned. I took a little trip to the Emerald Isle last week. You what? Remus was shaken by this news. You could have been killed. Calm down, lad, Moody said, laying his palm on the table. Norman here's been on the case since you were a nipper. He knows what he's doing. He's just worried, eh, Kev? Ferox nudged him. Remus didn't respond. How could he tell these two men, who were older, more experienced, wiser, and probably more powerful than him, that they were being idiots? It was completely ridiculous that even 15 years after Liar Lupin's death, the Ministry continued to underestimate Greyback, refused to learn anything from their mistakes. You should have told me, he said finally. I could have helped, advised you at least. I didn't go alone, don't worry, Ferox smiled. I took young Daniel with me. No, bugger, I'd forgotten it. Danny? Remus balked, even more alarmed. But... It was nothing personal, Moody said. You know more about them than anyone, but after last year, you're just too close, too recognizable to the pack. We couldn't risk it. I wish you'd told me, Remus repeated, though he knew it was getting him nowhere. We're telling you now. Remus pursed his lips. Danny McKinnon. Greyback must be laughing at them. They just had no idea. So, what then? He asked, knowing he was visibly irritated now. What do you need from me? Well, we know he's on the move. He left Dublin after the last full moon without a trace. Him and a young female. Livia, Remus said. You know who she is? It's most likely her, Remus nodded. She's his most loyal supporter. She'll never leave him. Could you give us a description? Daniel caught a scent, but we couldn't really get eyes on her, Ferox said eagerly. Remus nodded. Okay, but you need to tell me next time. Fine. Moody shook his head impatiently. We'll keep you in the loop, where possible and within reason. Now what can you tell us about this Livia bitch? Remus told them as much as he knew. He felt he was retreading old territory, but no one ever listened to him anyway. He explained what Livia looked like. That was easy enough. She was hardly an ordinary-looking witch. We'll get them, lad, don't you worry, Ferox said as he shook Remus's hand before leaving. He'd completely missed the point. They hadn't tracked down Castor's pack, if they were even still a pack. Moody thought they'd left the country, and Remus hoped so. He hoped no one ever found them again. By the time they were all ready to go, Remus needed a shot, never mind another pint. His back was twinging with every step, threatening a full-on spasm, and he was in a seriously bad mood. He apparated back to London and pushed his front door open so hard the knob banged against the plasterboard. "Fucking hell!" Sirius jumped out of his seat on the couch. Remus blinked at him, embarrassed. "Sorry, didn't know you were in." "What happened?" "Bloody Moody! Bloody Ferox!" Remus winced as he pulled off his jacket. "Does your back still hurt?" Sirius cocked his head sympathetically. "Come here." He shuffled back on the couch, pulling his knees up so that Remus could sit in front of him. Remus did and closed his eyes, sighing gratefully as Sirius began to rub his shoulders firmly, bringing the pain out with his clever fingers. "What happened?" he asked. You don't have to go again, do you?" "No," Remus said. "No, just, I don't know. Do you ever feel like everyone thinks you're just some idiotic kid who knows nothing?" "No one thinks that," Sirius soothed. "I know you lot don't, but, they just don't listen to me. I know more about the werewolves than anyone in the Order. I'm Greyback's prodigal son, for God's sake." "Don't say that." Sirius suddenly wrapped his arms round Remus's waist, pulling him close and tight as if he were about to bolt. "If Moody and Ferox keep you away from that monster, then good." Remus leaned into Sirius and didn't say any more. "Will you stay in our lover's story? If you stay, you won't be sorry, 'cause we believe in you. Soon you'll grow, so take a chance on a couple of kooks hung up on romancing." 31st of July, 1980. "Remus, wake up!" Sirius shook him hard. "Piss off," Remus grunted, covering his head with the duvet. "It's the middle of the night." "Who cares? Come on, it's time!" "Sorry."
Madam Hooch was an awful teacher. I kind of picture Madam Hooch as like Rick.
We don't know if she's an awful teacher. She's a bad referee, but we don't know if she's an awful teacher. Harry doesn't take her classes.
Fair enough. Yeah. Alright, we won't get into it.
"Who cares? Come on, it's time. Baby Prongs is on his way, or their way." "What?" Remus sat bolt upright in bed. "Fuck! That's the spirit!" Sirius cheered. "Get dressed!" Remus scrambled out of bed and got dressed so fast he tripped over his trouser legs twice, banging his head on the dresser. "Ah!" he grumbled, rubbing his forehead as he joined Sirius in the living room. "Silly sod," Sirius said fondly. Lucky Marlene'll be there, eh?" "I have a feeling she'll be busy." Sirius walked into the fireplace, grabbing some flue powder. Just as he was about to throw it down, he gave Remus a funny look, cocking his head. "Mooney, your shirt's inside out." "Potter Manor!" And with a blaze of green flame, he was gone. Remus looked down at his shirt. The buttons were on the inside. Damn. Oh well, he was too sleepy and too jittery to sort it out. He took a handful of flue powder and walked into the fireplace next. He stepped out into the Potter's living room, which currently resembled a train station waiting room. Gully came scuttling through, arms piled high with blankets, and Mary, Peter, Sirius, and Arthur Weasley were standing about talking. "Remus!" Mary gave him a quick hug. "Your shirt's inside out," she said, smoothing a hand over his chest. "Any news?" he asked. "James sent a Patronus for Marlene about 2 hours ago. She was staying at mine to be closer to St. Mungo's, so I came too. They've been upstairs ever since. I asked if there was anything I could do, but you know what Miles is like when she's got a job to do." "James is up there too?" Remus glanced at the ceiling nervously. He'd never say so, but he had an absolute horror of childbirth. He wasn't 100% sure what it involved, other than a lot of screaming and probably blood, too. "Do you think they need anything?" Sirius said, wandering toward the stairs. "Miss McKinnon will have it all under control," Arthur said cheerfully. "James won't be doing anything more useful than holding Lily's hand, I promise you. Sit down, lads. I'm afraid we're all in for a very long wait." They all did, quietly. There was a funny atmosphere. No one except Arthur had ever experienced this sort of worry before, and Remus was very glad he was there. Mary got up and drew the curtains back. It was the peak of summer, and the sun was already full in the sky, birds singing, and the Muggle milkman whistling as he made his rounds. "Tea, anyone?" Remus said, feeling the need to do something useful. He eyed Peter, who was leaning on his elbow, head nodding. "Or coffee, maybe?" "Good man, Mooney." Sirius nodded. "I'll help." In the kitchen they found that Gully had already laid out the things for tea and set some water to boil in the big copper kettle on the hob, so Remus and Sirius only needed to bother with the coffee. They did this quietly, though Remus caught Sirius's eye once or twice and couldn't help but smile at the boyish excitement he saw there. Just as they were about to bring the trays through to the living room, a door upstairs slammed open and footsteps could be heard on the landing. "Padfoot!" James's voice. "Prongs?" Sirius ran through to the hallway, leaning over the stair banister and staring upward. Remus hurried to join him, and Peter was not far behind. James peered down at them, red-faced, misty eyes and beaming. "It's a boy!" Harry. That was the name they'd decided on, according to Marlene, who came down to gratefully accept a cup of tea and sank slowly into the couch. She had dark rings under her eyes, but smiled at everybody anyway. "Lightning fast delivery," she murmured, sipping the milky brew slowly. 20 minutes active labour." "Maybe he'll be a chaser like James," Peter said eagerly. "Is Lily okay?" Mary asked. Marlene nodded. "Course she is. Nothing stops Evans." "I'll be off then," Arthur said, standing up and fastening his threadbare cloak. "I've been away from Molly and the boys too long already. I'll let Dumbledore know the good news, of course." They all said goodbye. Once he'd gone, Sirius went to the stairs to look up again. "Sirius, love," Marlene called sharply. "Give 'em a bit of alone time, eh? Family time." "Oh, okay." He nodded, turning back to the room and leaning in the doorframe. He stared into space for a while, and for once Remus couldn't guess what he was thinking. Sirius shook his head slowly and said, "Harry Potter," very low. "It's a nice name, I think," Mary said brightly. She glanced at Marlene and stifled a giggle. "Better than Neville, eh?" Marlene giggled too, guiltily. "Oh, don't. I could barely keep a straight face when Frank told me." Remus got up and went to stand with Sirius. He threaded their fingers together. "You're a godfather," he whispered. Sirius turned his head toward Remus, nodding. "Yeah," he nodded. "Blimey, I really hope I don't balls it up."
Well, that's a steaming pile of foreshadowing.
Right?
And yes, I am smirking at your combo. I read the chats.
What?
I don't always want to interrupt you. What?
Oh.
Udempeg.
Where?
Being smirking at our convo.
Oh.
The Sarah said, lightning fast.
Oh. Yeah.
Get it?
Yeah. Ha ha ha.
And also, Vane, I must have missed it, so I'll check that after the stream. Either on Twitch or Discord. I know, tugging at the heartstrings. This is, when everyone is together, the chapters are always good.
Yeah.
It's when
like, this
Remus
was good.
is off on his own.
I mean, that whole conversation about the werewolves was annoying in this chapter. If that part was gone, the chapter would have been fine. Because we don't like Remus.
Not anymore. I used to really like Remus.
Yeah, not anymore. He's a douche now.
Now it's not even canon Remus, but anytime we go through the main books, I'm just gonna be like, you.
You.
You put me through 188 chapters.
Of your...
Well, no, not 100. It's probably been like 30 now. 30 chapters.
Of terrible
BS.
stories.
You made me sad, Remus. Over and over.
I am
to
disappointed.
To the point I couldn't feel sad for you anymore.
Yep. I just... Canon Remus is fine. Canon Remus is fine. But yeah, this like the whole birth of Harry, that was good. That chapter was really effing long though. Hi Lola. Hi Lola. Did you like this chapter, Lola?
Are we still pretending you don't read with an accent?
Huh?
Are we still pretending you don't read with an accent? Tom said. I remember...
Oh, yeah.
I remember early on, we got a couple comments from people that it would just be in the comments just, wait, what? You're not British?
Yeah. We got that a lot.
I was just listening to the chapter, then all of a sudden, you're speaking with an American accent.
Yeah, I remember we got that a lot, yeah. Yeah, like, Remus is, like, pissed off that they're not keeping him in the loop about the whole werewolf thing. I also, this is kind of like a weird...
Look what happened last time, Remus.
Yeah, seriously, look what happened last time. Of course they're not telling you anything.
Forget it, Remus. Your best friend just had a baby. Your man's a godfather. Be happy.
Right?
It is great to see, little Harry Potter.
Little Harry Potter. I also think it's just like how they're talking about how Harry's going to grow up with magic and love and this and that. And it's like, well, Harry is going to have a really shitty time.
I know.
For a long time.
I think someone said that that doesn't age well.
Yeah. Sirius being
You're
like...
gonna grow up all spoiled. And
yeah, Sirius being
such
like...
a great life, Harry.
Wow. No kid... What kid should have to grow up miserable? Or whatever he says to Remus. Yeah.
Except Harry. Harry has to.
I also like that we got the little nod about baby Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Born in March. Yay.
I know.
Still,
so now all three characters are alive.
I still wanted a little something about baby Hermione.
Right? There should have been something.
Just a little something about baby Hermione.
Maybe, like, Harry will go to some daycare or something like that.
And they'll meet the Grangers or something.
Yeah. Pulls some girl's super curly hair.
Yeah. Big, thick, bushy, whatever hair.
Your fake accent is my British accent is terrible. My British accent I can do for like 3 words and then it turns into like an Indian accent. If I can even do one at all.
Do you?
Or like an Australian accent. It always morphs. I can't be consistent with it.
Can you check the man's temperature before we read the next one? British, like, with all the lights and crap, like, basically you just have to pretend like you're on Love Island. And then that's like British Valley Girl. Like, that's really, like...
That's the secret. That's where you learned your British accent. You just watched all that awful reality.
No, that is not where I learned it from. I absorbed myself in Harry Potter for years when I was a child.
I know, I'm just kidding. And 78.6.
Oh, so it's maintaining.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Shall we read the next one? It's like we're almost done, and the author decided that all of the chapters are just getting super long. Although the author did put in here that her fiction was at the time was nominated for a Marauder medal by the Shrieking Shack Society.
Is that really a thing?
It's a fanfiction thing.
Really?
Yeah.
The Shrieking Shack
She won
Society?
Best Work in Progress, and she was nominated for Best Characterization of James and Best Characterization of Remus. They're smoking crack on that one.
Right. She did do an amazing job with James.
Yeah,
I'll
James
give
is
that
great.
to her.
Yeah,
James
yeah.
is awesome. Remus.
Yeah, no. Okay, anyway.
Oh, then again, I haven't read a lot of other Remus fanfic.
That's true.
So I don't know what to base it off of. This might be the best version of Remus.
With an Australian accent this time, please. It's allowed. It's fan fiction. Too right. I suppose I could try to give an Australian accent a whirl.
Right, the new season of Bluey came out. We just watched that with Ramona, so...
Wackadoo! Fair dinkum, I'm a godfather!
That's great.
Just made myself
Crikey,
laugh.
Remus, you're a beaut. Oh man, imagine a fanfic where Steve Irwin is actually a wizard.
He's
And-
like Newt Scamander.
Yeah. Except, like, Harry is, like, gonna die from Nagini. And then Nagini just stops. Steve Irwin just has it by the tail. Oh, look at this beaut.
Look at her. She's curled up. She looks like she's ready to strike. She's a little angry right now.
Oh, danger, danger.
Whoa, that snake just popped out of a lady. Wow, we've never seen that before.
That would be great. Just...
We're making Kayla laugh. So I'm proud that we're making Kayla laugh.
Voldemort just yelling, "Where are you going with my snake?" Oh, we gotta relocate this one. There, I just lost the accent. See, that's... Crikey! And that's how the sixth Horcrux is dealt with.
That's how.
Steve Irwin to the rescue. You didn't...
Nagini! No! We're gonna have to take her and put her away somewhere safe. She's awful smelly after sitting in that lady for who knows how long. We don't know when the last time it was she ate. Remus, every time he's trying to figure out how he feels about something or what he wants. Yeah, no. Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, no. Yeah, no, yeah.
Nah, yeah, nah.
Yeah, nah, nah. Yeah, nah.
Oh man, that'd be awesome. I would love to just write that fanfic.
Australian Harry Potter. Oh, God.
You good?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't even know where to go from here.
I don't know. Oh, Professor Dumbledore, what's the password into your office? Ah, Harry, it's Golden Gay time.
Oh yeah, what was that? Wasn't that like a...
It's an ice cream.
An ice cream.
Yeah, it's an ice cream.
I am 30.
I am 31.
So
I'm gonna have an asthma attack. I know. I better calm down. That's the movie's Australian accent. It is.
Yeah,
It's super stereotypical, Kayla. We're sorry if we're offending you. We were trying to be as ridiculous as we could.
It was just a joke. That was more of like Aussie man, Australian accent.
Yeah, that was definitely leaning hard into Aussie man territory.
It's easier to do the stereotypical Australian accent.
Right, than to try to actually listen and see, like, oh, this is what you sound like if you're from Queensland. This is what you sound like if you're from New South Wales. Like, I'm sure there's differences and
oh yeah,
based on where you come from and all that. Okay. There are content warnings for gore, violence, and minor character death.
What could die? Well, I mean, is this when the Potters die? Are we fast
No, it's
forwarding
going to be
that
1981 when the Potters die.
much? Oh, I didn't hear the date.
It's 1980.
Oh, winter 1980. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, who could die?
Maybe Greyback's going to kill Ferox.
I feel like that's kind of being set up, yeah. And he's the only one that can be killed right now that wouldn't interfere with canon.
I was going to say,
timeline.
based on the last few instances where Ferox has shown up, like, I think he's going to die at some point. Just remember, it's prawns on the barbie, not shrimp.
Yes.
For real life.
Okay. Yeah, that's really your Australian accent. It's a mixture of Aussie man and Bluey.
Kind of is. Yeah. What very wide-ranging things.
I know.
The kangaroos hear me do it every morning, all the time. When I go in there, I talk to them. And I say things like, when I'm raking up, I just say things like, God, so much shit, Ruse. So much shit. Like, I don't know.
Just talk. You feel the need to talk to them.
Yes, I do.
Accent.
I do. Why have you shit so much over here? Should we just go forward?
Yeah.
Let's just read.
Yeah, because now I'm just thinking about, I wonder how hard it is to do an American accent. I wish I could, like, speak another language to, like, see.
I know that, like, some English actors have said, like, getting an American accent to be correct is very difficult.
I feel like, yeah,
like,
but that
like,
doesn't really...
Hugh Laurie practiced his for, like, hours and hours and hours and hours.
When I found out that he was British, I was shocked.
Right.
Like, no, that isn't him. Same with, the guy from The Walking Dead. Can't remember the actor's name, but, the sheriff guy.
I didn't watch enough of that show to...
Oh.
I know who you're talking about. But, yeah. Hablo español. Not very well, but...
I was gonna say...
I could speak it and get by. I speak enough Spanish that I could get by if I went someplace. I took it for 8 years. No, not 8 years. Like 4 or 5 years.
I was gonna say, I took it for 5 years.
I took it like 4 or 5 years and I...
5 years of Spanish, went to France.
Yep. Bien. Muy bien. The Spanish is hard because I always think of the words in Russian before I think of them in Spanish. So it's...
So you're like translating everything twice.
Yeah, it sucks because when I want to speak, like, before I said muy bien, I wanted to say очень хорошая first, and I had to go, wait, no, that's not right. All right, I'm gonna read this chapter now. Okay, let's
All right,
do
yeah, I'm
this.
distracting you.
All right, let's see how much we can get into this because these are long chapters. Let's see how much we can get done. Chapter 169. Nice. The War, Autumn and Winter, 1980. You done too much too young. You married with a kid when you could be having fun with me. You done too much too young. Now you're married with a son when you should be having fun with me. Don't want to be rich, don't want to be famous. Ain't he cute? No, he ain't. He's just another burden on the welfare state.
Nice.
I don't...
Also, before we start, how many languages do you know?
3.
3?
English, Spanish, Russian.
Okay. I know 2.5. So I know English, Spanish, and then I can kind of get by with French.
That's how I feel about Spanish now, is I can get by. I could probably read and write. My grammar might not be that great, but... And then the Russian, like... I used to be able to write it, but I haven't written it in so long. And my grammar was never that good.
Oh, there it is.
We are located in New York. Not the city, the state. All right. Wednesday, 3rd of September, 1980. Whoosh. Splash. Remus landed on his feet, just about, right in a muddy puddle in the middle of the high street. Bugger, he muttered, yanking his cloak up out of the way. His boots were beyond saving, socks already soaked through. He hadn't realized the holes were that bad. It was definitely time for a new pair. He'd need to check his savings. It looked like it might rain later, too. Bloody perfect. Remus was in a very bad mood.
Dun, dun, dun.
Shocked! And wet feet were the least of it. Still, he was in Hogsmeade for a reason, and he knew he just had to pull his metaphorical socks up and get on with it. He wished he wasn't alone, but even if someone had been available to come with him, James had the baby, Lily and Sirius were in Broadstairs on reconnaissance, Marlene, Peter and Mary were all working. He'd been told to come alone, as usual. He trudged toward the 3 broomsticks, thinking at least there would be a nice warm fire and maybe a nip of whiskey waiting for him. He'd need it. Whenever he was summoned to meet with someone alone, it was usually werewolf business, and that always required a stiff drink. He hoped it was news of Greyback rather than Castor. It began to spit rain as he came within sight of the pub, and he jogged a bit to save the rest of his clothes from damp. It was a quiet afternoon in the little Scottish village. The students of Hogwarts would be in their lessons, the wizards who lived in town would be at their occupations, and very few people left the house these days, if they didn't have to. The pub was nice and empty. Remus felt a stab of nostalgia as he entered, remembering how only 2 short years ago he and his friends had all sat in one of those booths, bright-eyed and naive, looking forward to their futures. Who could have known that saving the world would be such a grey, monotonous slog? "Remus Lupin as I live and breathe," Rosmerta chirped from the bar, one hand on her round hip, bosom overflowing as usual. She glanced hopefully over his shoulder. "Black not joining ya?" Remus shook his head and went to take a seat near the hearth, so he could at least try to dry out his shoes. "Not today, Rosmerta," he said, trying to affect good cheer. "Could I get a glass of—" "2 glasses of butterbeer, please," a familiar voice intoned. Remus whipped round, finding himself face to face with Dumbledore. "Oh, hello, Professor," Remus said, embarrassed. "Remus," Dumbledore nodded politely. He never called him Mr. Lupin, not since Remus had asked him not to years ago. "Please be seated." He gestured grandly, like a vicar about to give a sermon. Remus sat. Dumbledore always made him feel 11 years old. "How have you been?" His old headmaster asked, kindly, gracefully taking the armchair opposite. He set down a heavy-looking leather briefcase on the rug between them. Remus eyed it warily, but answered, "Well, thanks, you know." "These are difficult times," Dumbledore said, and Remus didn't respond to that, because he wasn't sure he was supposed to. Rosmerta bustled over with the butterbeers, setting them down on the round side table. When she'd left, Remus lifted his tankard and drank, just for a distraction. He could pretend it was alcohol. Maybe that would help steady him. He desperately wanted a cigarette, but for some reason that felt wrong in front of Dumbledore, so he just sipped the butterbeer, feeling the cloying, syrupy mixture rest on his tongue, slide down his throat. "You must be wondering why I asked you here," Dumbledore said, watching him. Is it Greyback? Remus whispered. Dumbledore smiled. You needn't worry about eavesdroppers, Remus. We are quite safe to speak freely here. No, alas, there have not been any further reports of Greyback or the young lady he is travelling with. Oh, Remus blinked. Well, then what? There is a more pressing matter, or at least it will be, if I am correct. Right. Remus shifted uncomfortably. He was not usually the go-to agent when it came to pressing matters. Dumbledore seemed to read his mind. I am in need of someone with a keen eye for detail and a good deal of patience. He leaned forward and opened the briefcase a crack. Remus peered inside. Books? He said, surprised. There must be 100 of them inside. Some sort of extension charm, perhaps. Indeed, Dumbledore smiled, closing the briefcase again. So, you need some research done? I do indeed. Tell me, Remus, how much do you know about prophecy? Well, I never took divination. He scratched his head. He was intrigued now. But obviously it comes up a bit in runes. I've read a bit. You will need to read a lot more, Dumbledore said gravely, and I must impress upon you both the importance of this task and the sensitivity. Anything you learn must be kept entirely confidential. Do you understand? Aye, of course. Remus nodded, slightly alarmed. But what do you want me to look for? For now we are simply seeking a fuller understanding of the nature of prophecy. Many of these books contain secret transcripts, some of which may need translating, of known prophetic and oracular statements. I should like to know if there are any which appear to relate to Voldemort, or this particular moment in history. So, you think someone might have already made a prophecy about how the war ends? They may have, the professor replied shortly, but we cannot afford to make any rash decisions. While there is still time, I would like to know as much as we can. Dumbledore switched between I and we regularly when he spoke about the war, Remus noticed. Still, he pretty much understood. Okay, he said. How shall I let you know if I find anything? I shall come to you, Dumbledore replied cryptically. Once again, Remus, I cannot overstate the importance of this task. You must tell nobody. Understood? Understood. That meant not telling Sirius or James, or any one of his friends. Sometimes Remus wondered if secrets were simply his lot in life. He thought for a moment. Professor? Yes? Should I keep an eye out for prophecies that have been prevented, or... He rephrased because he knew that was impossible. Circumvented? I mean, I don't know loads about it, but there are always loopholes, aren't there? Dumbledore's eyes glittered, and a small smile played on his lips. Very good, Remus. Friday, 24th of October, 1980. And that was how Remus spent most of his autumn. He studied well into October. It wasn't bad at all. Actually, he enjoyed it. He'd always liked research, and though he missed the peaceful, airy chambers of the Hogwarts library, he was pretty content squirreled away in the little London flat, with endless pots of tea and a quietly smoking ashtray on hand. If Sirius came in, he would cast Obfuscate over his books and notes, and Sirius seemed happy with this arrangement. He understood what needed to be done in the service of the war. Anyway, they were barely at the flat. Remus only used it to work in. They spent much more of their time at the Potter's mansion, where James's old bedroom had been turned into a nursery, but Sirius's old bedroom was the same as ever, only with half of Remus's things in it too. Together the Marauders and Lily had grown into a funny little family, with baby Harry at the centre. It took Remus a month or so to really get over his fear of infants. It still made him a bit anxious to actually hold Harry, but Sirius had been a huge help. Sirius was utterly besotted with his godson. The child was barely ever out of his arms when they were visiting, a relief for Lily and James, who were only just bearing up under the pressure of parenthood combined with their duties for the order. Say Padfoot, Harry. Go on. Padfoot. Sirius cooed one evening as he bounced the tiny little green-eyed creature on his lap. "They don't talk until they're at least 1, Remus smirked, sitting gingerly on the arm of the couch. "I looked it up." "Normal kids don't." Sirius tossed his black hair back, gently holding Chubby's...
Ew.
Harry's chubby little wrists. "But Harry Potter is no ordinary baby. He's clearly very advanced for his age. Come on, Harry. Say pad foot." "Don't get your hopes up," Lily laughed. "James's mum told me he didn't speak until 18 months. "Oi!" James yelled from his father's study. "I was an extremely thoughtful child, that's all." "Oh yeah? What changed?" Sirius yelled back, grinning. "You're hogging him, Padfoot," Peter whined, reaching his arms out. "Come on, I haven't had a cuddle yet." "It's not my fault he likes me best," Sirius replied, poking his tongue out at Peter, and then at Harry, puffing out his cheeks and bulging his eyes so that the baby giggled and burbled contentedly. "I'll give you a cuddle, Pete," Remus teased. "Lily, tell him," Peter tutted, folding his arms crossly. "Honestly, I've got 1 son and that's plenty," Lily laughed, getting up. "No fighting while Mummy and Daddy are out, okay, boys?" She gave them all a very stern look. "You've been spending too much time with Molly," Sirius said. "Right, I'm ready." James came back through to the living room in his travelling cloak. Lily already had hers on. She gave him a stoic smile. "Let's go then." A cold silence entered the room, and Remus looked at the floor because he couldn't bring himself to look at any of his friends, and especially not the baby. Lily broke it. "Oh, stop being so melodramatic, you lot. It's a standard mission. We've done 100 of these." She went over to Sirius and bent to kiss Harry's head, already sprouting a thatch of fine black hair. "Bye-bye, Harry. Mummy and Daddy love you so much. We'll see you soon." James didn't say goodbye. He had a wooden, muted expression that Remus had been seeing more and more since his parents' funeral. "Are you sure you can't tell us where—" Peter started. "Sorry, Wormy." James held his hands up. "Moody's orders. You know how it is." Peter nodded, shoulders slumping. Remus knew how he felt. It was difficult enough knowing that your friends were walking into danger. It was even harder not knowing exactly what they would be facing, as though they were disappearing out of reach. "Come on," Lily hurried her husband, pulling him from the room. "Back before morning, we hope," she called from the hallway. And then the door slammed, and Harry burst into tears. "Oh, bugger," Sirius said over the screams. Have him now if you like, Pete." It took hours to finally calm Harry down. He bawled as if his heart was broken, and wouldn't settle until it was nearly midnight. "Definitely couldn't do this full time," Sirius said, head in his hands as he slumped on the floor of the nursery. "Jesus, I swear that kid's possessed," Remus whispered, rubbing his temples. He had a splitting headache. "Shit, you should go to bed," Sirius said, looking at him. His usually immaculately silky black hair was in knots, and there was definitely some milky baby sick stuck in there. Without a trace of irony, he frowned at Remus. "You must be exhausted." "Oh, I'm fine," Remus shrugged. He tried not to wince as he felt every tendon in his back tugged. Yesterday had been a full moon. "Actually, I was going to stay. You know, I've got that work to do." "Oh, that." Sirius nodded. His mouth was a straight line. He climbed to his feet, glancing at the red and gold cot one last time. Harry was sleeping, thank God. They both padded quietly out of the room, leaving it open just a crack. On the landing, where the lights were still on, Sirius looked even worse. He had rings under his eyes, which were bloodshot. Remus touched his arm gently. "You ought to go to bed." Sirius grabbed his arm suddenly, eyes widening. "Moony, don't go." "I'm only going to the flat." "Please." Sirius clutched at him, half mad with tiredness. "Just take the night off. Just stay here with me." "Pete's here." Remus turned his head slightly. He could hear Peter snoring on the couch downstairs. Not much comfort, he supposed. "But I want you," Sirius said desperately. That struck Remus in an unusual way. To anyone else it might have sounded whinging, childish. After all, Sirius was a grown man, and Remus had important work to do. but somehow it dislodged a feeling Remus hadn't had for Sirius in a long time, a desire to protect him, to hold him close and tell him everything was going to be okay, and to be strong and reliable for the man he loved. Amazed by his revelation, Remus did exactly that, hugging Sirius tightly and kissing his filthy hair. "Okay then," he whispered. "I'll stay." After all, he thought, as Sirius trailed off to have a shower, relief evident in his posture, wouldn't Sirius do the same for him? Friday, 21st of November, 1980. That time Lily and James came back, as always, tired, a little harder, a little less bright, but otherwise perfectly okay. Remus always felt enormous relief when any of his friends returned safely, and each time swore to himself he would not take it for granted. But what does that mean when you were young? There had been deaths. Deaths in the Order, deaths of people he knew, but no one really close, no one he truly loved. The Pruitts he'd been fond of. Benji Fenwick he'd chatted to once or twice, but they weren't close, and their losses didn't affect him severely. Compared to others, Remus had been extremely lucky. Of course, you never feel lucky at the time. Good fortune is too often something that can only be recognized with hindsight. Sirius turned 21 in November. They didn't have a party, but Hagrid baked a rather wonky, though very large and delicious cake, which they all ate at the Order Safety House after the regular meeting. Someone took a few photos, but Remus forgot to try and track them down. "It's a big deal for Muggles, 21, he commented as they climbed into bed that evening. "That's when they come of age." "Why? Muggles can't do magic," Sirius frowned, yawning. "No, I know, it's just an old-fashioned thing," Remus tried to explain. "You get the key to your front door or something like that." "Daft Muggles," Sirius grumbled, his eyes already closing. "I feel old." "Well, you're not." Remus settled down beside him. "I'm the one going grey. 21 is young. Really, really young." Sirius sighed wearily. "Doesn't feel like it." Remus knew exactly what he meant, but he didn't like it. They were all of them caught in a confusing place between adolescence and childhood. Baby Harry had only exacerbated that. There was a sense of time running out, of needing to accomplish as much as possible, as fast as possible. Peter's crawling at his ministry job, always angling for a better position. James and Lily playing house and soldiers at the same time. Remus and his stupid drinking. At least he had the research to do. That seemed to be going well. Every now and then Dumbledore dropped by to see how he was getting on, and Remus would offload as much information as he could, with detail, because he knew Dumbledore liked detail. The old man would nod sagely, stroke his beard, and sit quietly, ruminating. If he came to any conclusions, he didn't tell Remus. It felt good, though. Remus even felt himself warming to Dumbledore for the first time. He liked being useful, and then, just before the November full moon, Remus got his chance to be really useful. As usual, there was a message from Moody. He was to apparate to some very specific coordinates on Friday the 21st of November and meet Ferox there. "Tell him no," Sirius said, annoyed. "Bloody Moody, he knows that's the night before the full moon. You shouldn't be out running his errands while you're not well." "Jesus, you make me sound like an invalid," Remus rolled his eyes. "I'm sure there's a good reason for it. I'll be fine, don't worry." "Send a Patronus if anything happens," Sirius said solemnly. "I don't care about protocol. Just say you'll let me know." "It will be fine," Remus repeated. He really did feel fine about it all. When the moon was waxing, he often felt stronger than usual, and usually didn't get bouts of nausea until a few hours before sunset. It was good to get out of London, away from traffic and noise and crowds. It was good to get away from the Potters, from nappies and baby talk and crying and cream spinach. At the agreed time, Remus apparated following the instructions he'd been given, and found himself on a windy cliff top somewhere very cold and bleak. The sea crashed and raged miles below, and the long grass whipped round his ankles. Remus breathed in deeply, inhaling the salt, the soil, the sharp cold scent of the clouds. The wolf inside licked its lips, ears pricking to attention. Yes, Greyback had been here. "Hello!" Ferox was away off in the distance, a stick-figure man waving at him. Remus raised a palm in greeting, bent forward into the wind, and trudged to meet him. "Hi," he said, breathless as he approached, cold hands deep in his pockets, nose frozen. "Where are we?" "Galloway," Ferox said cheerfully. He had a thick leather cloak on with a hood, but his face was still ruddy from the harsh weather, and white fog blew from his lips as he spoke. Pretty, eh? Remus wasn't sure if he was being sarcastic or not, so he just gave a neutral smile. Privately, he thought yes, the landscape was beautiful, if foreboding. Greyback's been here, he said, wanting to get down to it. You know for sure? 100%, Remus nodded. Ferox nodded too. Excellent, we were right then. There was a report to Muggle police about a couple of tramps, man and a woman, looking shifty. Reckon they've been here, eh? Remus nodded, breathing in again. Yeah, but the scent's old. Maybe a day or so. Right, shall we take a walk then? See if it gets a bit stronger? Okay. Remus wasn't sure how he felt, being the Order's bloodhound, but he wanted to find Greyback as much as anyone, so he did as he was told. They strolled up and down the cliff top for a while, until Remus could be sure which way the trail led. As they headed downhill, away from the sea, and down toward a small country road, he grew confident that Livia and Greyback had been there very recently, and began to walk faster. Ferox had no trouble keeping up, of course. He was as fit and healthy as he had been. What do we do if we find them? Remus asked as they walked. He was careful not to bring Livia into it, because, okay, while she was definitely a killer, he couldn't help feeling a bit more sympathetic toward her. After all, she was his sister in a warped kind of way. Moody reckons they're hunkered down somewhere for the full moon, Ferox replied. Based on my research, werewolves are weakest right after the moon, so we'll wait till then. Your research? Remus gave them a funny look. Few books I've picked up. There's not a lot to go on beyond the NEWT level stuff. Have you spoken to Madame Pomfrey? She looked after me for 7 years. She knows loads, Remus said, trying not to sound too impatient. Or Marlene McKinnon. She's been constructing her own case studies to see if any advances can be made in lycanthropy treatment. Or, you could ask me. I might know a bit. Ferox laughed good-naturedly. All right, lad, all right. I see what you're saying. It's just there isn't always time to follow umpteen leads on a prick like Greyback. Got to move fast. Remus said nothing, because it only would have come out wrong. He really hated criticizing Ferox. It felt so awkward and embarrassing. He'd looked up to him as an ideal vision of manhood once, and he didn't like tampering with that illusion too much. But honestly, the way he talked, you'd think Greyback was just some petty criminal, not a murderous creature and charismatic cult leader. The scent had grown very strong now, and as they crested the next hill, Remus could make out a large grey-black structure in the distance, the ruins of an old castle. Scotland was littered with them, of course. This one was a tower house, and looked like a big square prison squatting ominously over the remains of a boggy moat. There, Remus said, stopping short. That's where he'll be. Ferox clapped him on the shoulder. Good work, lad. Saturday, 22nd of November. Ferox didn't want Remus present for the confrontation with Greyback. Remus did not give a toss. He knew where to go and when, and nothing could change his mind. I'm coming too, then, Sirius said firmly, after he wheedled enough information out of Remus. No, you're bloody not, Remus said. Am too? Sorry, Mooney, but there is absolutely no way I'm losing you to that monster a second time. You didn't lose me last time, you big drama queen. It was a mission, Remus countered. Anyway, I can't put you in that sort of danger. I'm in danger every day, Sirius shrugged. If it's right after the full moon, you'll need my help apparating. I've done that before, Remus dismissed. It's hard, but I'll manage. Anyway, this isn't a normal mission. You wouldn't just be backup. You'd be leverage against me. He knows who you are. He knows what you mean to me. He made you tell him? Sort of. I told you they can read minds. That bastard. I'm definitely coming with you. Remus had forgotten how strongly Sirius felt about legilimency. Walpurga had used it as a punishment, and he would forever associate mind-reading with black magic. Remus hadn't raised the fact that this appeared to be a werewolf trait, and then when pushed, he could do it too. Probably not a good idea to mention that just yet, he decided. So Sirius got his way, of course, and Remus just hoped he'd be able to protect him. They went to the Lake District for the full moon, a place that the Marauders had enjoyed themselves before, a place with happy memories. James and Peter didn't go. James hadn't joined them for a full moon since Harry was born, and Remus understood that he didn't want to be away from his family too often. Peter said something vague about working late, and honestly Remus was too busy worrying about the upcoming battle with Greyback to question it. The wolf had a good time that night, but Remus didn't remember much about it. It all got lost in the blood-red haze of transformation, the choking and clawing and groaning as he twisted back into his human form. "Ugh! I've got you, Moony!" Sirius had him by the shoulders, pulling a cloak across his body. Remus forced his eyes open, knowing how little time there was. "Wand!" he croaked, getting up. Sirius handed it to him. "We've got to go, now," Remus said, leaning on Sirius for support while he pulled his clothes on, hands shaking and fumbling with the buttons on his shirt and trousers. "We're going. Just take a breath," Sirius said, his voice calm and firm. "Hold on to me. I'll apparate us." Sirius was as good as his word. He didn't try to dissuade Remus from going, or try to tell him what to do. He simply got them where they needed to be. Ferox was there already. "All right, lads," he nodded, keeping his voice low. It was still quite dark under the grey Galloway sky, and the grasslands were cloaked in swaths of gauzy mist, the castle ruin rising from it black and foreboding. It was quiet, no bird song, no noise at all, like a place out of time. "Have you seen them?" Remus asked desperately. He could smell them. The scent was very strong. "Heard a bit of noise. Must have been them turning back," Ferox said. He gave Remus a look. "You okay, our kid? Looking a bit green round the gills." "Fine," Remus swallowed. "Fine. We should go in now." "Right you are." Ferox stood up. "One's out." Pity we couldn't get them when they were wolves, eh?" he said with a smirk. "Those pelts fetch a few bob on the black market." Remus felt sick. The sweat on his back turned cold. He reached for his hand in the dark and Sirius reached for his hand in the dark and gave it a squeeze, then tossed his head and said sharply, "Don't say shit like that. It's disgusting." Ferox glanced back at him, shocked, then at Remus. He frowned. "Sorry, lad. Didn't mean anything by it. They didn't say another word as they approached the castle. Sirius and Ferox were trying to be quiet, but Remus knew they may as well have been a herd of elephants sneaking up on Livia and Greyback, whose senses were as sharp as his, even after a full moon. Still, they might be slower, weaker. When they were up against a castle wall, Remus felt it. Greyback was waiting. The scent changed, and his voice was filled with that dreadful growling voice. "Hello, cub. Brought me breakfast, have you?" "He knows we're here," Remus whispered frantically. "Be careful." Ferox touched his brow in a sort of salute to show he understood. Then he rounded a corner and entered, Remus hurrying behind, and Sirius too. Ferox had his wand raised, and as he stepped under the broken archway, under the broken archway of the shadows of the ruin, he opened his mouth. He planned to use the silver chain spell to bind the werewolves and contain them long enough for the auras to take over. But it was too late. Remus was only a split second behind Ferox and saw the rock come down. He stiffened, then crumpled to the ground, blood oozing from the cut at the crown of his head. "No!" Remus cried over Greyback's laughter as the beast of a man stepped into the early morning light, his face full of glee. Livia sprung out next and lunged at Sirius, grabbing his wand and knocking him to the ground. "Ooh, who's this then, brother? Pretty, pretty boy," she crowed, sitting astride him, holding both of Sirius's wrists over his head as he struggled. She looked thinner, but was obviously as strong as ever. "Let him go," Remus snarled, raising his wand, furious. Then he screamed in agony. Greyback grabbed his wand arm and twisted it so hard he felt the bone snap. "Remus!" Sirius called out. Remus was almost blind with pain, and Greyback laughed again, letting him up. "Welcome back, cub," he purred. "How I've missed you." "Fuck you," Remus groaned, staring about for his wand, which he'd dropped somewhere. Now, Greyback chuckled as Remus straightened up to face him, clutching his broken arm to his chest.
You should be on your hands and knees after what you did to me. Kill him, father, Livia cackled. Kill the traitor Remus Lupin as he killed my brother Caius. Then I can have the pretty one.
Greyback grinned at her fondly.
She's full of bright ideas, my beautiful girl.
Remus took the opportunity to look over Greyback's shoulder. Ferox was moving. Very slowly. He was obviously hurt, but Remus saw his fist tighten round his wand.
Go on, then,
Remus said to Greyback, gritting his teeth through the pain.
Kill me. Then what? Then what?
Greyback sneered.
Then I rip apart your little human pet, that's what. Then I tear him from fucking limb. But not before I've had my fun with him.
You're disgusting, Remus shot back, stalling for time as Ferox's eyes opened. May as well tell Greyback what he thought of him while he had the chance.
You're filth. You're nothing. You talk about freedom, but you don't have the first clue what it is. You're nothing but a bully. Voldemort's lapdog. Kill him!
Livia shrieked. Greyback's face had turned demonic with rage, yellow eyes glowing, and Remus really thought that this would be the end. He scrunched his eyes shut and braced himself.
What? Ah!
Livia cried out again, and Remus heard a dog bark. He opened his eyes to see Livia knocked backwards by Padfoot, who was growling. Remus had never seen him growl before, teeth bared, frothing at the mouth.
Father!
Livia yelped.
Help me!
And with a flash of purple light, Livia was silent. Her eyes went wide. A great black slash had cut her throat. She clutched at her neck to stem the gushing blood, but it was no good. It was too late. Greyback gave a great roar of anguish, but Ferox was already on his feet, wand up, ready to cast the same curse again. Greyback was cornered.
You're a dead man,
he hissed at Ferox, and then, with one final snarl, he disapparated.
Bugger!
Ferox grunted, stumbling forward, still poised to curse. Sirius was serious again and stood beside Livia, staring down at her. Remus went over too, feeling an uncomfortable mix of relief and genuine sorrow. Her grey fur cloak was matted with blood, which looked deep purple in the dim light. It was dreadful, but his first concern was for Sirius.
Okay?
He asked quietly. Sirius nodded, still looking down.
You? Think so?
His arm was throbbing, sending shooting pains up into his shoulder, but he knew that could be fixed. Livia could not. Ferox joined them, a hand pressed to his head where the rock had struck him.
Merlin, what a mess, he muttered. At least we got the bitch. Her name's Livia,
Remus said angrily. He suddenly saw the scene as a passer-by might, 3 men standing over her tiny body. She could have ripped out each of their throats out the night before without stopping for breath. She was a force of nature, queen of the night. She was one of the strongest people he'd ever met. She was one of the only people in the world who truly understood what it meant to be a wolf. Her eyes were still open, staring blindly at the broad grey sky. Remus knelt beside her and gently closed them.
So we were wrong. Wasn't Ferox.
No, it wasn't Ferox.
Had us for a moment there.
Yeah, I
rock
genuinely
down.
thought he was gonna bite it.
Yeah, like Anna said, Peter working late,
Yeah, Peter working late. I think we're
moonlighting
yeah.
with the enemy.
Mm-hmm. Is this like some kind of disillusionment with your childhood heroes thing with Ferox?
Maybe.
In his whole werewolf thing that he's got going on?
I don't know.
I don't know.
It felt like, I don't know. I think this situation might have been better if it was not Livia and the other werewolf that he, like...
Castor,
thank you, yeah. Castor.
Yeah, if they'd have killed him, that would have made more sense.
Yeah.
Because now, all of a sudden, Remus is
just
like...
built up that relationship with Castor.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of works with Livia. It's fine, but... That's the way I would have went about it.
I think... like... His feelings towards Livia, all of a sudden, now that she's dead, he's like, oh, she was a wolf, and you killed her, and I hate that you killed her. She was the only one who understood that part of me. Like, dude, when you were with them, you were creeped out by her, and you hated her.
Well, no, because when she, like, licked him, he, like... Didn't he say he, like, felt weird feelings, almost like he was aroused or
Yeah,
something?
but he hated it. He didn't want to be aroused by her.
He didn't want to, but he still liked it on some primal level.
Right.
That wolf inside of him liked it. So I guess like I said, I see how they, like, built up to it. I just think, like, Castor
Would have been more of an impact.
Like, the big... Yeah.
Dan thinks that the author is trying to put Remus in the same position as Snape, doing the double agent thing. Being a little disillusioned with what the team is doing because Ferox just, like, killed her.
Maybe. I don't really get that sense. I feel like you could make it that way, but I don't think the author's trying to do that.
Ferox, like, saying the whole thing about the werewolf pelts fetching a good price on the market. And then, well, at least we got the bitch. Seem very intentional to kind of drive Remus away from him.
Maybe.
And it seems a little out of character for that guy to me. Doesn't seem like Ferox is...
Yeah, a little bit. Like, what did they do to you? How did they hurt you?
Is it that whole, like, I idolize this guy, and now that I'm grown up, I'm realizing that he's a flawed dude?
I guess kind of like Dumbledore. Ferox is Remus's Dumbledore.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, it was okay.
Yeah, that's true, Anna. Maybe that's why I'm not getting it, because I really didn't. I agree with Anna. I didn't get the feeling that Snape was, like, disillusioned. Snape, like... He always kind of chose one side. It was just there was a turning point.
Well, Dan, I think the difference with Remus going to the dark side was that he was actually getting sucked in by it when he was on his mission.
Yeah.
He was actually getting sucked into it. Whereas when Snape is playing double agent,
he's not sucked in. But then again, I mean, he could have had those moments. We don't know. We would have to see the story from Snape's perspective. Maybe he did have those moments where he was just like, you know, Voldemort's making a lot of sense right now. Maybe I should just give this up.
I don't think so.
Dumbledore had to be like, remember... As he's holding a lily in his hand.
I don't think so. I think Snape is too self-torturing to do that. Tom said, why do I get the feeling that the author is writing Sirius and Remus is gay? They're...
Yeah. So if you haven't been around for the earlier chapters, yes, in this fan fiction,
they're gay.
Remus and Sirius.
No, Dan, I wasn't talking about Snape being sucked in. I'm talking about Remus starts to actually get sucked into that whole werewolf thing. Whereas Snape joined the dark side, and because of his own actions and the tragedy of his own actions, it leads him to doing his switch.
Yeah, that's the difference. Snape, like, always knew what he was doing and he knew which side he was choosing.
Yeah. Whereas
It was never-
Remus did this whole, I don't know who I am anymore. I want to be a wolf.
Yeah.
I like this other wolf and he's hot. But I don't like that they're killing everybody.
But he doesn't have the risks that Sirius has.
Yeah.
It seems like Snape believed blindly, like Harry and Dumbledore, until he finds out Harry has to die. Yeah.
I think Snape...
I'll leave this open to you because you are the Snape expert.
I think Snape's whole deal is that everything he does for Dumbledore going forward is all about atonement for what he did.
Mm.
Everything he does is all about, whether he fully believes Dumbledore or he doesn't, or thinks Dumbledore has an ulterior motive, everything he does is to make atonement for the sin he committed that he cannot forgive himself for. That is what Snape is doing.
And I think for Dumbledore, it's stopping Voldemort. And for Snape, it was seeing Harry survive.
Protecting Lily's son. Yeah, that's what it was.
So when he found out that Harry wasn't going to die, he felt like he could never atone for his sins. So I think that's why he had the biggest issue with it.
Well, I don't think Snape ever really believed he was ever going to fully atone. I don't think he would ever forgive himself. I don't think he would ever allow that for himself.
Not saying he would ever fully forgive himself, but I'm saying I think he said that's the best he could do. And then Dumbledore was kind of like taking that away from him.
Mm. But anyway,
It's like an eyelash in my eye.
That's
Sorry.
annoying.
Yeah. Can't get it.
Reading book 7, I've always felt that Snape and Harry paralleled each other in their relationship with Dumbledore. They can't see the whole plan until the end. Right, and Dumbledore does that on purpose, I think. Dumbledore purposefully doesn't tell them everything because he needs them to get to where they need to be to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this chapter was okay. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with it.
More on the chapter. Someone did ask in the beginning, what happened to Lily's parents? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
I'd have to, like, check Pottermore or something to see if there's anything about her parents.
I think it was Dan looked it up and he found that, like, the wiki says they died sometime between, like, 1971 and 1981.
Lily's parents?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's possible.
But we don't know how.
Maddie says that the reason why these two chapters aren't terrible is because Remus isn't being a whiny crybaby the whole time.
Yeah. That was my biggest issue with all those chapters where it kind of slumped.
Do we want to read one more before we go?
Yeah, if we have time.
I'm willing to read one more.
Okay, let's do one more then.
All right. Lola's having a good time.
Oh, yeah. I think I left my laptop on, so she's sucking up the heat.
Warm for that baby.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Summary. The darkness darkens. Warnings for alcoholism, gore, blood, and homophobia.
All right, now we're getting good stuff.
I'm waiting for, like, the real homophobia. I have really not seen a lot of it.
No, it really hasn't.
It's been super, super, super subtle.
I mean, maybe some people who are really sensitive to that might be offended at certain points, but...
Yeah, maybe. That's true. Alright, here we go. Chapter 170. The War. Winter 1980 and Spring 1981. Well, I love you, baby. That is not that song. Sorry.
Got thrown off.
Well, I love you, baby. I'm telling you right here. But please don't make me decide, baby, between you and a bottle of beer. Baby, come on over to my side. Well, I may not live past 21, but woo, what a way to die.
I mean, live fast, die young, but 21 is a little too young.
Tell that to James and Lily.
Yeah. I'm just saying for the song.
Yeah.
They didn't, do anything like that. They didn't drink themselves to death.
No. Sirius made Remus go straight to bed after the skirmish in Galloway. Ferox summoned Moody to the scene and he excused them. Remus wanted to ask about Livia's body. Were they planning to bury her at least? He didn't know if Livia had any wishes regarding her final resting place, but he assumed she'd prefer to be somewhere in nature, somewhere moonlight could reach her. Marlene came over to the flat on her way back to sort out his broken arm. "Thanks, Miles," he smiled weakly. "I can do dislocations, no problem, but broken bones." "You really shouldn't be doing spells on yourself, Remus," she chided. "You know you can always contact me if you need to." "I know." She left a sleeping draught and some more of her own ointment for pain relief, and ordered him to stay in bed and do nothing useful or important for at least 48 hours. It wasn't until the next day, when Remus woke up after 2 in the afternoon, that he was suddenly gripped with terror at the memory of Greyback's last words. "He's going to kill Ferox!" he shouted, sitting up in bed. Sirius came through the living room, eyes wide with concern. "What?" "We need to find Greyback," Remus said, climbing out of bed, limbs creaking. "He said he'd kill Ferox." "Mooney, it's been taken care of," Sirius said, placing cool hands on Remus's shoulders, smoothing down his arms in a comforting gesture. "Ferox is going to move to a safe house. He'll up his security and be extra vigilant. Don't worry." "It won't be enough," Remus shook his head, batting away Sirius's attempts to calm him. "Moody and Ferox, they don't treat Greyback like a proper threat. Look at what happened. He's more dangerous than they think, and now he's angry." "I'm sure Moody knows that, even if Ferox is a bit cavalier about it," Sirius said. He was being so diplomatic, so reasonable. It was infuriating. "How are you feeling? I'll put the kettle on. Why don't you have a bath? You'll feel better." Remus did take a bath because his muscles still hurt. He slathered on a bit of poultice afterward, which at least meant he could straighten up fully. He refused to rest. All he wanted to do was check on Ferox, make sure he had the right security in place. After all, wasn't it Remus who'd been doing all the grunt work on protection charms? It was within his remit, surely. In the end, Sirius gave in and summoned Moody through the fireplace. The Aura's grizzled head hovered in the flames like a hideous Easter egg. "All in hand, Lupin," he barked. "You can stand down." "But Mad-Eye," Remus pleaded on his knees in front of the hearth. "Greyback will find him, I know he will. He'll be able to follow the scent. If you just tell me where he is, then I can—" "Classified information," Moody snapped. "Every precaution has been taken. You can trust that the Auror's office can cope with a lone werewolf." Remus's temper rose and he was about to retort, but Moody signed off. "No time for this, Lupin. It's been a busy week. Get some rest." Remus groaned furiously, slamming his fist on the rug. "See?" Sirius said, standing behind him. "Moody's got it all sorted." "But I need to be sure," Remus said, climbing to his feet. "They don't understand. Not really. Not like—" "Not like you do." "Exactly." "Remus," Sirius's voice hardened out of nowhere. "You need to be careful with that kind of talk. I think you ought to put a lid on the werewolf stuff for a bit." "What?" Remus turned to look at him, blindsided. "The werewolf stuff? What's that supposed to mean? I am a werewolf." "I know."
Sirius bit his lip. "But you're a wizard too, and you're on our side. It just might be a good idea to focus on something else. You don't want anyone in the order to get the wrong end of the stick." Remus gaped at Sirius as if he was a complete stranger. "The wrong end of the stick? I'm not trying to upset you," Sirius said, choosing his words carefully. "I'm only warning you. Things are bad enough already. No one trusts anyone. Frank told me Dumbledore thinks there's a spy in the Order, and if you keep bringing up how chummy you are with dark creatures, then—" "I'm not chummy with dark creatures," Remus shouted. "How can you? Unless you're saying I'm a dark creature too." "Of course I'm not," Sirius returned, clearly offended. "It's just, you know how much prejudice there is, and it's not going to do you any favours to broadcast this weird connection you have with them. I saw Olivia. I saw Greyback. You're nothing like them. Don't let people think you are." "Has somebody said something?" Remus asked, wondering where this is coming from. "Was it Danny, or—" "No, it's not. It's... Well, after you've spent all that time with them, people have raised concerns, that's all. You can understand that, can't you?" "No, I can't. I was only with the pack because Dumbledore ordered it, just like I've always done everything Dumbledore's told me to do." "I know that." Sirius looked away as if embarrassed. He tucked a strand of hair behind his ear. Remus knew that gesture. Sirius was nervous. He clenched his jaw. "Do you trust me?" he asked, knowing his body language was aggressive, but not willing to temper it. Sirius looked up at him, blue eyes filled with alarm. "Of course I do. It's just—" His eyes fell again, another swish of hair. "You've always been good at keeping secrets, Moony." Remus's mouth dropped open. He clenched his fists, then unclenched them. "Fine," he said coldly. "If that's how you feel." He turned and walked out of the flat. Sirius didn't try to stop him. Remus went to the nearest corner shop first and bought an extremely cheap and nasty bottle of gin. Then the problem was where to drink it. He didn't want to look like an alky, chugging hard spirits on the street in broad daylight, but he didn't really have anywhere else to go, either. He considered looking for Grant, but he didn't know if he'd be working that day. Grant had moved back to London early in the spring, after too many times stuck on the late train back to Brighton. He was living in a bedsit somewhere north, but based on the telephone conversations they had, he rarely slept there. Grant had a string of paramours, and if he wasn't attending a lecture, he could usually be found bed-hopping, at work in the Sawyer's Arms pub. "Variety's a spice of life," he teased Remus. "And I'm crap on my own. Can't hack the quiet." Remus knew how that felt. A lot of the time it was the reason he drank. In the end, he decided he was too angry to be around anyone else and went to hide in the park like a proper old waster. He ought to have gone to Grant's, he thought, once he was properly drunk. That would serve Sirius right. He grieved for Olivia, too, and made a silent toast. She'd been cruel, yes, and a murderer, but none of it had been her fault. Not really, not if you went back far enough. She'd been taken by Greyback before she was old enough to speak, when she was Harry's age, maybe. Olivia had no choice but to become a killer, any more than Remus had a choice about his drinking. He went home eventually, when it got too cold. He hadn't thought to bring a coat when he stomped out. Sirius was sitting on the couch waiting for him, hands twisting anxiously in his lap. When Remus walked in, Sirius took one look at him and, no doubt smelling the gin, shook his head disappointed and got up to make a pot of strong tea. They didn't stay much and never spoke about werewolf stuff again. Remus did not celebrate Christmas 1980. In fact, he didn't see any of his friends or Sirius from the full moon, which fell on the 21st of December, until January. He spent it hiding in Moody's cellar with Danny McKinnon. Ferox was dead. Not just dead, destroyed,
eviscerated, ripped to pieces. According to the Daily Prophet, every wall of Ferox's house was splattered with blood. Moody said that the carpet was so saturated it squelched under their feet, the Aurors who had arrived on the scene. Greyback had made good on his promise, just as Remus had tried to warn them, but he couldn't bring himself to say, "I told you so." He was too angry, angrier still when Moody told him he'd need to hide from the Ministry. Ferox's murder spurred the wizarding public to demand a clampdown on werewolves. There were too many unregistered names, laws needed to be harsher, the register ought to be published. It was no longer safe. 2 days after Ferox's death hit the headlines, a werewolf, Theodora Lupa, was attacked in her home. She was fully registered and had spent the full moon locked up in the cells at the Ministry, but her innocence meant nothing to the vengeful mob. What was more, the Death Eaters appeared to be using the excuse to stir up more bias against magical creatures. It was understood that Voldemort himself was offering a reward for information on the locations of any half-breeds. So Remus was forced to hide. "I'll miss Harry's first Christmas," he said stupidly as he packed his suitcase. "James and Lily will understand," Sirius said. He was watching Remus from the bed, pale with terror. "We all just want you safe." "I know," Remus nodded. There was nothing more to say. They shared a chaste kiss goodbye. Things hadn't been the same since Livia died, and news of Ferox's hellish demise had turned Remus completely numb. Moody was not much of a host. He blindfolded Remus and made him side along, so he had no idea where he was. He saw none of the house, if it was a house, but the whole place reeked of black magic, so heavy and thick Remus thought he'd choke on it. In the cellar his blindfold was removed, and it was a sorry sight. Danny sat on one rickety put-up bed, and there was another pushed back against the opposite wall. There were no windows, and the walls were bare brick. Moody had put aside some provisions. He explained that there were so many protection charms and cloaking spells on the cellar door that it took hours to enter or leave, so it was best that they just sat tight until he told them the coast was clear. Remus agreed, only because he knew that he could break the charms if he wanted. There was a little toilet at the back with a sink, no shower. They'd have to do their best with a flannel and a bar of soap. The food was all dried stuff that didn't need too much preparation, and besides that, there was nothing at all. Remus was just glad he'd had the foresight to bring a few books, not to mention the bottle of fire whiskey he'd stashed just in case. "Hi," Danny said dully. "Hello," Remus nodded as Moody locked the door to the top of the stairs. "This is shit, innit?" "Yeah." Remus bent over and set his suitcase beside the bed, then sat on it. It sagged heavily and squeaked. A faint smell of mildew rose from it, which put him in mind of the shrieking shack. "Never spent a Christmas away from my family," Danny said, "even when I was touring." Remus nodded glumly. He hadn't had Christmas without Sirius in almost 10 years. "Couldn't believe it when I heard about Leo Ferox. He was so... I don't know, I just really thought he'd make it through the war." "Did you know him well?" "He was my care of magical creatures, Professor," Remus nodded. He wasn't sure it'd sunk in yet. He didn't really feel very much, but when he thought about Ferox... He didn't feel very much when he thought about Ferox, only a blurry sort of wistfulness. "Oh, wow," Danny said. "Bet he was good at that." "Yeah, he was." Remus gave a small smile. "Had loads of good stories." He suddenly remembered Achilles, Ferox's Kneazle. What had happened to it? He thought about Greyback in full wolf form, coming across the sleek silver animal, and for the first time his eyes filled with tears. Bugger. Why did this have to happen now? He thought, as his shoulders began to shake and he tried to get himself under control. Why couldn't I just get emotional at the flat, when it was just Sirius? Sirius wouldn't care if he cried. It was no good. He covered up his face with his hands and just waited for it to stop. "Sorry, Remus," Danny said awkwardly. "I didn't realise he must have meant a lot to you." That made Remus cry even harder, because of course Ferox had meant a lot. He was Remus's first crush, not counting David Bowie maybe, even if Remus hadn't really fully understood it at the time. He was one of the first adults Remus trusted, who made him feel like a person with value. Maybe they'd clashed a bit as Remus had grown up, but no one was perfect. "I'm sorry," he coughed, wiping his eye with his sleeve. "It's been a bad year." "You can say that again," Danny said. "Oh, Miles says hello. You should have seen her when Moody came for me. She was all set to come along too."
"Really?"
Remus smiled, sniffling.
"That sounds like her."
"Yeah, she said to give you a hug and a kiss, so tell her I did, okay?"
"Okay."
Remus laughed, feeling a bit more normal. They pottered about a bit in their little living space. Remus tried not to think about the cell at St. Edmund's, or the shrieking shack, or the crypt in the forest, every cage he'd been forced into. He unpacked his clothes then, finding nowhere to put them, repacked them, and slid his suitcase under the bed, leaving only his pyjamas out. They had a little bit to eat, just some bread and cheese. Remus hadn't eaten any meat since hearing about Ferox. "What were you going to do for Christmas if you weren't stuck here?" Danny asked over supper.
"Spend it at the Potters," Remus replied, "with the new baby."
"Oh, yeah, of course. You're all mates, aren't you?" Danny nodded. "Marlene talks about you like you're celebrities."
"Ha!"
Remus grunted.
"Maybe James and Lily. And Sirius."
Danny cleared his throat awkwardly. "Miles said you and he were..." Remus just looked back at him, holding his gaze, allowing him to feel uncomfortable. Danny finally looked away. "Obviously that's fine. I'm fine with Marlene and Yaz, aren't I?" Remus just shrugged.
"It's a bit like being a werewolf,"
he said, pulling the crust off his bread.
"Everyone's perfectly fine with it as long as you never bring it up."
He had a few leftover cigarettes and would have liked one after dinner, but for one thing, he didn't want to share, and for another, there weren't any windows, and it seemed a bit rude to smoke the place out. God, this was going to be agony. Things got even more awkward when it came time for bed. They were both yawning and agreed it was quite late, and that they were tired. Remus began to take his socks off and stood up to unbutton his trousers when he realized Danny had not moved. He couldn't see why he was so shy. Didn't Quidditch players get undressed in front of each other all the time? James had been a borderline exhibitionist in the dorm room at Hogwarts, and surely Danny couldn't be shy about the scars. Remus had heaps more than him.
"Close quarters,"
Remus commented, hoping to put Danny more at ease. Danny twisted his mouth, eyes flickering up and down Remus's height. Just so you know, it's not like I've got a problem with you, but I don't swing that way." Danny eyed him warily. Remus rolled his eyes.
"Oh, poor me, whatever shall I do?"
he drawled, then turned his back and got into his pyjamas. He climbed into bed and rolled onto his side, facing the wall, to prove that he couldn't care less which way Danny swung. "Have you seen my boyfriend?" he wanted to say. "As if I'd be interested in you, you big lump." Eventually, Danny undressed and got into bed too, then flicked out the light. Remus could hear his heart beating and realized that Danny could probably hear his too. They had even less privacy than they thought. "Sorry, Remus," Danny whispered eventually. "I didn't mean anything by it." That echoed something Ferox said, and Remus felt the sadness return. He rolled onto his back and spoke to the ceiling.
"It's okay. Forgotten."
Quiet for a while, Remus waited, hearing Danny poised on the cup of a question. "Did he always know?" Danny whispered. "Sirius." Remus squinted over at him. "You know, did he always know you were a werewolf?"
"Oh, yeah, mostly. He worked it out when we were 12 or something."
"And you still got together?"
"Yeah."
"That's good," Danny said. "It's nice to think somebody might be able to look past it one day, you know?"
"It shouldn't be something people have to look past in order to love you," Remus said fiercely. "It's part of who you are."
Danny didn't reply. Things got a bit easier between them after the first night, but they kept each other at a distance anyway. Remus did a lot of reading. Danny sometimes exercised, doing press-ups or jogging on the spot. It was annoying, but Remus couldn't blame him. On Christmas Day, Remus couldn't take it anymore and whipped out the bottle of fire whiskey. They both got extremely drunk and spent all of Boxing Day hungover. The room stank. By the 27th, they were climbing the walls. Remus had finished his book. Danny had even read one of them, and they tried to have a conversation about it, but Danny knew so little of Muggles that he hadn't really understood the plot.
How much longer can it be?
Danny said, exasperated. It was the 31st, the last day of the year.
What if we're still here for the full moon?
That's weeks away, Remus replied. He was lying on his back on his bed, an arm slung over his face. Danny snored and he kept him up all night.
Anyway, we'd be fine. Best place for us.
What if we attack each other?
Well, I won't attack you if you don't attack me.
You mean you can control it? Remus sighed.
Yeah, you can too. Not around humans, but other animals. Other wolves, it's fine. Why do you think they live in packs?
I never really fought, Danny said.
What was it like?
The pack. Remus bit his lip. Should he lie? Or did Danny deserve to know?
It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be,
he said. That was the first time he'd admitted it.
Obviously Greyback was. But the rest of them, the ones who split off, they were okay. They were like family.
Well, Danny said, I've got a family already. That was how it went with Danny. He wanted to know things. He wanted to learn from Remus, but if he heard anything that made him uncomfortable, it was right back to self-loathing. Remus missed Sirius so much he swore he could feel it in his gut like hunger. He wanted so desperately to have someone he could really talk to. What a relief it would be to spend time with his best friend, to relax. I'll apologize, he promised himself. I'll never get angry at him again. I'll kiss his feet and crawl over hot coals and broken glass if it'll get things back to the way they were. He didn't want to end up like Danny. They were a week into the new year by the time Mad Eye finally came for them. They both caught his scent at once and sat up, keenly staring at the door. They'd almost run out of food by then, and Remus prayed this wasn't just a grocery delivery. He felt the charms being slowly undone, and each layer peeling back. Finally, the door swung open, and the clunk of Moody's wooden leg on the first stair.
"All right, boys," he called out. "Ready to get back to work?"
Coming out of that cellar was like coming up for air. Remus felt as though all of his senses had been muted for weeks, and now everything was a riot of colour and noise and scent. Moody wasn't joking about getting back to work. He took them straight to a new safe house where the rest of the Order were gathering for a meeting. Remus could smell Sirius as soon as he got in the door, and it made him so giddy with excitement that if he'd had a tail it would have been wagging. He ran his fingers quickly through his greasy hair and thought about how awful he must look. Moody let them down a corridor, rather than going straight through the kitchen, where they could hear everyone talking, veered into a small utility room which had a Muggle washing machine inside and a big pile of dirty towels in a basket.
"I'm bringing you through in a minute," he explained. "Miss McKinnon's been harassing me every day for the past 2 weeks to have you back, and Black's threatened me with every curse I've ever heard of."
He smirked indulgently.
"So you're out now, but I need you to both listen."
"Right," they both said, blinking.
"The danger hasn't passed. You're still under threat. I can't have either of you leaving your homes without a disguise. I'd rather you didn't leave at all."
"But how can we help the Order if—"
"There's plenty to do."
Mad Eye raised a hand, warning, fixing Remus with a hard look.
"Research, communications, tracking spells, what have you. Unless you were enjoying your cozy little break in my cellar."
They both shook their heads fiercely. "No, never."
"Right then."
Moody nodded, businesslike again.
"Come on then."
He pushed the door open and they filed out, following him to the kitchen. It was crowded with people, most of whom Remus knew, and they all turned as soon as the door opened, 50 pairs of eyes, all wide with mistrust and worry.
"Danny!"
A blonde blur rushed past Moody and Remus and body-slammed Danny, winding him. He chuckled and hugged Marlene back. "All right, sis."
"Remus."
Sirius had stood up and was crossing the room anxiously, climbing over chairs and squeezing past people who had to bend and twist out of the way, snatching back mugs of hot tea. He had to look down as he approached so he didn't trip, and his hair fell in front of his face, swaths of black silk. As he reached Remus, who was still standing halfway in the hallway, Sirius had to raise his arm and sweep his hair back, and Remus swore the room went completely silent for a moment, and the only sound was the frantic thudding of his own heart. He forgot to breathe and gasped, "Hi." Sirius smiled a little and stepped forward, a hand on Remus's shoulder to push him out of the room into the dark hallway. Away from everyone else, Sirius slid his hand up Remus's neck, into his hair, and kissed him on the lips. So beautifully. Spring, 1981. The honeymoon period after Remus's hiding lasted well into February. Both of them were so apologetic and so grateful to be together again that for a while everything was wonderful. They were teenagers again, especially because Remus wasn't supposed to leave the flat, which meant that there really wasn't much else to do. Sirius popped over to check on James and Lily and the baby every now and then, and he still had missions to go on, but he always rushed back to Remus as soon as he could. They spent days and evenings lounging in bed together, eating beans on toast, and smoking and playing records. It was like living on a private island. They even had to cut off the flu connection for safety's sake. Luckily, Remus was allowed to keep the telephone, his lifeline, and the others came over when they could. Mary visited on her way back from work at least twice a week to avoid her nosy family. "It's bliss over here," she smiled, sinking into the couch and closing her eyes. "If you had a telly, I'd never leave." "Yeah, I'm working on it, trust me," Remus replied. "Is it really bad at yours? Do you want to stay over for a few nights?" "Nah," she opened her eyes. "I want to be with my family. They keep me normal. It's just, they don't know anything about the war. I don't want them to know, but it's so hard." "Sorry, love," Remus said wistfully. "Want a drink?" Mary gave him one of her long, gentle looks, tilting her head. "No, Remus." She touched his knee. "It's never a good idea to drink when you feel like this. Doesn't make things better, does it?" Remus just shrugged. He didn't see what the big deal was. Mary just smiled again and took a sip of her tea and continued as if nothing had happened. "Anyway, I can always pop to Darren's if I need a break from the kids." "Darren? That kid you were going out in 4th year?" "Well remembered," she laughed. "Yeah, he still lives across the hall. I go over sometimes. We're friends." "Just friends?" Remus raised an eyebrow. Mary looked down, suddenly sad. "Yeah, that's all it can be right now. He's a muggle. I'm in the Order. I'm already putting my family at so much risk. I couldn't bear if..." She shook her head, her face resolute. "Sorry, I'm supposed to be down here keeping you company, not bringing you down." She still didn't want to drink after that, but they had a nice long chat anyway. In hindsight, Remus would be glad that Mary was there that night, and that she stopped him getting drunk, because that was the night that James got hurt.
Hurt or deaded?
Not deaded yet.
So, the part of this chapter that really got me is, what a hypocrite. Remus, boy, I hope I don't start feeling down on myself all the time, like Danny.
I don't ever want to be self-loathing like Danny.
What have you been?
Have you been reading this story, Remus? Because... What?
Yeah. I also forgot that Remus has developed a drinking problem. Slowly on his slide down to alcoholism.
Yes, apparently. Because that has to be a thing.
Yes. I mean, it kind of makes sense for... It would help explain why he's so, strung out looking when Harry first sees him.
Maybe Dumbledore said, "Come to work at Hogwarts, but you gotta dry out first."
Yeah, and then he went down to Hagrid's hut, and that was all over.
They're all trying to figure out the timeline of the prophecy thing.
Yeah. Because was the prophecy overheard after Harry was born, or was it predating Harry's death or birth?
It's after. It's got to be, well, what does the prophecy actually say?
Are you going to look it up? Prophecy, word for word. I know Anna said that it was like a week after the charm went up that all that stuff went down. So Wormtail worked quick. Well, Wormtail, Snape and Moldy.
The prophecy says, "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies."
So will be born. So
Yeah,
the prophecy was before Harry was born.
right.
Okay. It's clearing that up. So Voldemort was already kind of looking at this point.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. I wanted them to break up in this chapter so badly. And I'm happy that things are not the way they were after that conversation, because I feel like Sirius is finally fucking figuring it out.
Oh, that was another hypocritical thing. Remus was like, I don't understand why Sirius wouldn't trust me. It's because you lied to him. He just caught you with Grant. You're always keeping things secret.
Right. You have literally given Sirius no reasons to trust you many times.
Yeah. At this point, I think Sirius is just an idiot.
He's being gaslighted for too long.
Yeah.
And then Lupin is just so offended by the whole, like, werewolf thing. Like, I get the whole, it's who I am, you're making me repress who I am thing, but it's not coming across that way.
Yeah.
Like, I think the werewolf thing is supposed to be almost a metaphor for homosexuality. Like, I shouldn't have to hide who I am, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I was kind of getting that. That's kind of what I thought the whole side plot was going to be.
But it just doesn't translate very well for me.
No.
And then the whole thing where he says, well, it's not Livia's fault that she turned out the way she did.
I mean, kind of is.
How is it not Livia's fault? She is a grown-ass adult who can make her own decisions.
But she was brainwashed and, pampered by Greyback.
She's probably groomed by Grey. I wouldn't say pampered by Greyback.
Yeah, groomed. Better terminology. The prophecy was made in June 1980, so it was June. I think it does say that in the book. It was like in June, the prophecy.
It's got a date on it. Yeah, the prophecy in the Department of Mysteries has a date on it. Yeah.
So, like Dan's saying, that must mean that James and Lily defied Voldemort 3 times before this.
I wonder if this...
Why don't we see that? I want to see that.
Right? What did they do?
3 times of James and Lily versus Voldemort.
Right? Where was that action? I mean, in this next chapter, like, James got hurt, so I wonder if we're gonna, like...
Get number 1?
Get some kind of thing about, like, something about, like, what they did. Like, maybe Voldemort hurt James or something. Like, maybe we'll get some shit went down.
Maybe.
4 more chapters.
Till we're done? What?
No.
Oh, until James and Lily's death?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Maybe a new fight with Voldemort each one. It's going to be like Monster of the Week style, you know?
That'd be cool.
Power Rangers.
Yeah.
But alright.
I think
I have high hopes for these next chapters.
I hope that
Raising
they're
my
good.
standards.
I
We
hope
gotta
that
have
they're
some
good. I don't think these chapters have actually really been terrible. Oh, fair warning. After this next chapter, yeah, it says the next 2 chapters. Within the next 2 chapters is going to be, it's going to happen.
Oh, Wormtail's betrayal.
Yeah.
Jerk.
I haven't minded these chapters too much, but Remus's asshole behavior with Sirius undercuts everything else that's good.
Yeah.
Also, I'm just gonna say it because I feel like his character was good enough to warrant it. Phoenix Song for Leo Ferox.
Yes. Why'd they have to talk about the Kneasel, though? Ferox was one thing, but then make me think about the Kneasel
I know. Why are you dragging Achilles into this?
was not cool.
Not okay.
No, not at all.
They're trying to guess at the author's gender
Oh.
and all of that.
It's very hard because the author is Miss King Bean. So you have
I just don't
masculine, feminine, and they're just non-binary.
care. I just don't care. Doesn't matter to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess your writing speaks for yourself.
Although I do kind of get where Dan's coming from, saying it seems like a woman trying to write gay boys. Like I could kind of see that, but
I don't know.
I just whoever they are, they're definitely in love with Sirius.
That's all I can
But
say
also
for
want
sure.
to torture them by giving them an abusive partner in Remus Lupin.
Maybe they actually hate Sirius.
Maybe.
They're playing the long game.
Maybe.
They're not just gonna, give him a wedgie. No. Gonna make you fall in love with me and just slowly break you down.
Yeah. Right? I was just like, of course they're gonna kiss after they had their little whatever fight. And I don't know, that whole thing with, like, Danny and Lupin being in the cellar, I was just like, is that so James and Lily could defy Remus and we don't have to write it?
Maybe. I don't know. I kind of have... These chapters were actually pretty good.
Remus Lupin being a werewolf as a metaphor for AIDS, Melanie, is totally a thing. It definitely is. In the series, it is definitely mirroring, like, societal attitudes towards AIDS. For sure. Go ahead.
I think it could... Yeah. I think it's kind of...
Rowling has said that it is.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it's definitely what it is.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Never mind. I won't even say anything. Because Rowling knows all.
she is.
I can't remember what I was going to say now.
She is the creator.
Oh, yeah. So, these are some good chapters, and I'm pretty excited for the next few chapters, because I have a feeling that we're going to get some pretty Remus self-loathing chapters after their death.
So let's try to enjoy what's coming, maybe, and hopefully it's good.
Yeah.
I
think
just
we're going to
don't-
have another, 3 or 4 really good chapters. And then, I already know it's coming, and it makes sense at this point to have a Remus self-loathing chapter, but there's going to be a few in there that's going to be hard to get through.
It would have made a lot more sense if Remus had really developed and grown as a character, and then this happens, and then he reverts back. But he hasn't grown as a character.
He's going to
Hardly
become
at
an
all.
alcoholic afterwards, though. That's her growing.
Maybe in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I was going to say downwards. He's working on his roots, digging deeper.
I guess. I don't know. I can't believe we're actually pretty close to being done. We've got 8, 9. We've got like 20 chapters left, and then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
We are almost there.
I don't think we're going to finish this week, though.
No,
because they're getting so long.
Yeah, the chapters are getting long, but we will definitely, I'm sure, get to the death of Lily and James this Thursday.
This Thursday.
So, yeah, the chapters were definitely much better. So this Thursday, we will stream, probably the same time?
Yeah, 6:30 again.
As long as I get home early enough.
Yeah.
And,
well,
I should...
Are you worried about that? We could push it back to like 7 if you're worried about that.
No, I should be done I should be back.
Okay.
I should be back. So yeah, I don't know. This was definitely better.
Definitely.
I still don't see anything about any evidence for Peter's betrayal at all.
No, definitely not.
Like, I'm not getting anything from why Peter would be betraying them.
Right, he isn't acting weird around them or anything like that.
Yeah,
maybe he's just a really good double agent.
Like, oh, he's just working late all the time. But, like, there's nothing... I mean, they keep talking about how dreary and depressing everything is and people are dying. But I'm just not... I just feel like I'm not getting enough...
Dreary and people dying?
Of anything...
Oh, hey, Joey. How's it going?
Joey Roo, hello! By the way, Joey Roo, I just have to say that I am loving everything that's going on that I see on your Instagram. Things seem to be going very well for you, and I am very happy for you. The whole plot of these few years is non-existent in these chapters.
And also, good night, Ren.
Good night, Ren.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, well, I mean, she said these chapters are like a snapshot of everything that's happening.
Yeah.
But...
This would be like 500 chapters if she broke it down like she did the school years.
Oh my god, year 7. Dear Jesus. Oh my god. So much. So long.
It was.
Dragged out for so long.
It was a hefty boy, for sure.
It was a hefty boy. And I'm just like, how much more werewolf bullshit are we going to have to deal with? Are we almost done
At
with
least
the werewolf
20 more
bullshit?
chapters of it. Well, no. What would you say? We're 70?
171 is the next chapter.
17 more chapters.
Yeah. I just feel like there's just so much good mixed with, yeah, 7th year was just a waste of toxicity.
7th year just dragged on too much.
Yeah, a snap. There's no reference to the events that should be taking place. No, there isn't. All we get is Ron was born. Neville and Harry are born. Sirius and Remus are fighting again. Remus, for whatever reason, is researching prophecies.
Yeah, that's just because, yeah, it's just there.
I feel like letting Remus research the prophecies is not something that Dumbledore would ever have him do.
No.
That is something Dumbledore would be doing himself.
Right? It's like...
Dumbledore would not be giving that shit to
that's
Remus.
Right up there with Horcruxes. Dumbledore isn't gonna...
Yeah.
Distribute that work somewhere else. Outsource.
The author glosses over important events like the Potter's death, but then writes about the Boris and Remus crap endlessly. Yes. Yes, this is true. No Malfoy, no Lestranges, no Voldy or Snape mentioned in forever. That's true.
Yeah.
You would think they would have at least, like, talked about Bellatrix, like, at least once.
Yeah,
like,
you know, she's
like,
probably doing some crazy, awful stuff right now.
Like, shouldn't somebody be like, yo, Bellatrix is crazy, man. She's just... Did you see what she did to the O'Reillys the other day? Like, God. Or Barty Crouch Jr., he was in the story.
Yeah.
And he's, like, one of Voldemort's most, like...
sinister, psychotic.
And radical supporters. Yeah. There's no mention. No Longbottoms. People at my job know that I do a YouTube channel. Yes, they do, Melanie. So currently I work 2 jobs right now. I work part-time at a bank, and I work part-time as a zookeeper.
Hopefully that will be full-time zookeeper soon.
Hopefully eventually full-time as a zookeeper, yes. We mention how much Molly's brothers are loved, but nothing about what they do. I thought the thing about the Pruitts wasn't too bad. They at least mentioned them. What's your job?
I work in insurance. Thrilling.
You love it so much.
It's great. I mean, luckily I don't have to, like, deal with the customers. I kind of handle the back office stuff.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But yeah, there's no more Malfoy, no more nothing. It's just entirely James and Sirius. Sirius and Remus's relationship, and that's it.
Basically all kinds of insurance. I work for an insurance broker. So I basically handle the accounts for the company. I don't actually go and get the customers, but when the customers come in, I'm managing the accounts and, like, the commissions that come in, all that sort of thing. But it can be for any type of insurance, anything from commercial flood to personal homeowners. We would definitely go full-time YouTube if we ended up making enough to support ourselves from it.
Yes, if we could make enough money, then we would definitely do it.
Yeah.
But not yet.
I mean, I definitely love doing this, so being able to do it as a full-time job would be great. And there's just, we have a lot of ideas of what we want to do, but we don't always have that time to dedicate to it for the channel. So want to go full-time because there's definitely a lot more for the channel we want to do.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely...
Yeah, clerical work is vital. It's just so monotonous.
Yep.
I mean, I can't complain though. It's probably the best job I've had at this point. I get along with my coworkers. My boss is cool. I get to work remote. They're very flexible. So, as boring as the job is for me, at the same time, like all the other benefits, it's great.
Thank you, Melanie.
It's the first job I can't talk bad about.
I don't want to talk bad about my jobs. Number one, because I love the zookeeping, and it's wonderful, and I don't have anything bad to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially them
I was going to say, that's your career. That's
been
fighting to do.
Yes. Especially them ruse.
Yeah.
Got nothing bad to say about them ruse. But the bank, oof. I don't...
Remember, people at the bank know you do this.
That's why I don't want to talk about it, because people at the bank know that I do this, so I really... we would have to have a private conversation about that sometime, Dan.
Oh, and Kayla, don't feel bad. We get it.
Yeah, it's all good.
Money's tight for everyone, and we would never ask anyone for money. If you do feel like donating, I mean, we appreciate it.
Right,
we love it,
yeah,
but we'll
yeah.
never ask you for money.
Yeah, we're not gonna, like, hit you guys and beg you guys for coin.
There are some YouTubers that do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the...
There is one in particular that I'm thinking
We won't
about
talk
right
about
now.
anyone, but yeah, I know who you mean, because I've heard it.
it.
But when I come across I don't care what video it is, just...
I'm done now, yeah. Hey, Doda. Hey, Doda. Get your pee-pee, Doda.
Stop every 5 minutes to say, oh, by the way, you drop a donation here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't get it.
Yeah. But either way, I think it is about that time, because we should eat dinner.
Yeah, that's true. We haven't eaten dinner.
We haven't eaten dinner yet, so we should probably go do that. And we will see you guys again at 6:30 this Thursday for the climax of All the Young Dudes. I don't know if it's
Possibly the climax.
maybe the big moment of All the Young Dudes. Either way, we'll see you on Thursday.
Oh, and Dan, I can attest that I do like the mug. The mug is great. And don't worry about it. I mean, a $2 Patreon is still, you're supporting the channel.
Absolutely. Every
That's
little
awesome.
bit counts. Every little bit counts.
And obviously, if you want the mug, that's great. But just a little hint, there might be some more designs coming by the end of the week. So, yeah, that.
Yes, indeed, guys.
Just maybe.
Maybe some new stuff.
All right.
See you guys soon.
See you guys Thursday.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone.